Okay, calling to order the City Council regular meeting, 6:30 p.m., Tuesday, February 16th, 2021. And call to order. Lita, would you please do the roll call?
Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow.
Yep.
Councilmember Ken Gamblin.
Present.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Excellent. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-25, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual City Council meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public and public comment is able to be submitted. To view live, the city website, www.sammamish.us/TV21. YouTube or Comcast Channel 21 within Sammamish only. To view later, meeting videos are available the day after the meeting, again on the city website, www.sammamish.us/TV21, on the YouTube or on Comcast Channel 21 within Sammamish only. For the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Gamblin, would you please lead us?
Certainly. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, first up is the approval of the letter, and that is including a new item, including, yes. Okay, we have an approval of the agenda, but we've also got an amendment to the agenda.
That's correct, Mayor. I'll have Mike speak to it. If you, yeah, Mike's probably right. We need to amend the agenda so that we can take action on this item.
Okay, so.
And that item is a joint letter that was drafted for the city of Issaquah Mayor and our Mayor, you, to sign on behalf of Sammamish to go to Executive Director, County Executive Dow Constantine, just advocating.
I'm sorry,
for
point of order.
insight.
Can we put this motion on the agenda first before we start speaking to amendments to it?
Yeah, we're going to get the motion on the floor. They're just explaining what's coming.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I need a motion to put this motion on the floor.
Well,
Well, no,
Make a motion to amend the agenda
we need
to add.
We need a motion to.
we haven't approved, we need a motion to approve the agenda.
Yes, a motion to approve the agenda, then we amend it.
Okay.
And okay, so moved, and that was by Councilmember Gamblin.
Second. Treen.
By Councilmember Treen. Okay, now discussion. And here comes amendment, which is going to be, okay, so this was just handed to me. Okay, so we've got a letter that is coming in, and now I'm going to let one of you two talk to it. City Manager, did you want to finish your discussion?
Mayor, I'm so sorry, but somebody actually has to make a motion to amend the agenda.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to add the letter.
Did you want to explain what the letter is for them, or do you want to wait on that? All right, motion to, okay, motion. And do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Gamblin, thank you.
Now we can hear about it. Awesome, thank you.
Can we approve this?
Let me just speak to the letter. It is a letter that both mayors could sign on behalf of their respective cities in regards to the partnership that we have advocating for vaccination sites or a vaccination site and vaccinations for the east side. This would go to Executive Constantine in that the state is looking to the counties to decide how much and where the recognized sites are in order to determine volumes of vaccinations. They're all very short on vaccinations, as we all know, and we're working very hard to get a site set up on the east side. So we have the mobile site going. That's recognized by County Health. This is just a letter trying to get support from the county, an effort that the partnership felt was a step in the right direction.
Okay, hang on. I've got some questions here in the... Okay, so it looks like we have some questions here. I'm not sure where this started, but I'm going to start... Do you know who the first question was in the queue?
Councilmember Gamblin. Councilmember Gamblin was first.
Okay, Councilmember Gamblin.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I just want to confirm this is the same letter that was emailed out to us earlier today, same one?
Yes, it is. That's why
Got
I
it.
didn't
Thank
read
you.
it verbatim.
Thank you for that also.
Okay, next going down the line is Deputy Mayor.
I think she's having problems signing in. She's trying to sign back in, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And this might be you a second time, or this might have been you the first time. So I'm going to go down to Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, those first ones were just us trying to help Christy get her audio fixed there. So my question, Mr. City Manager, is you said that we already have the mobile vaccine unit up and running. So is this formal letter, like have we talked to the executive, or is this just our first ask to get, like, I guess I'm trying to understand, are we just requesting a certain number of doses? Are we requesting some sort of approval? Have we reached out? Is he even aware that this is coming? Just trying to kind of catch up on what's happening here.
The committee wanted to formally ask the executive director by letter from the committee. So as to whether or not there has been specific outreach, I believe there has to his office.
Okay.
And because the county health works for him and the state looks to the county health officer to identify those sites that get factored into the allocations that the state authorizes, it puts us formally on the radar. The mobile...
Okay, and go ahead, sorry.
I said the mobile sites are a separate operational activity of EFR, working in partnership with County Health, and this would help us with an interior site, if a site could be located, and or the mass exterior site that Emergency Manager Andrew Stevens has been working on behalf of EFR and on behalf of Issaquah and Sammamish.
Got it. Okay, so this is just asking that we could set this up at Lake Sammamish State Park, if I read this correctly. We just got it like an hour ago, but that's what we're asking, is for them to approve the site at Lake Sammamish State Park.
Yes. Let me add that there has been, Executive Constantine has talked about in press releases and or on the radio regarding the site in Redmond. and concert Redmond in concert with Microsoft. It's really not the city of Redmond, but it's over in Redmond. And there's been some misunderstandings about what's going on with that site. And so we wanted to make sure that the partnership get on the radar and not be looked at as a competition with that. That site is actually being done to coordinate off-site locations for some of the other healthcare facilities in the area. And when Andrew Stevens comes up, he probably can articulate the particulars about that site more clearly than I can.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, I see that you are back with us. Did you have a question?
No, but I just want to make sure you can actually hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? No. Okay. So now we are going to be adopting the amended agenda. Or the agenda as amended.
Actually, we have to vote on the amendment and then vote on the agenda as amended.
Well, actually, because we didn't do it that way. Normally, that's what we should have done. We should have adopted the first, but we did not go back and do that. We did not adopt the agenda that way. But okay, so we go back, we adopt the agenda, which is what we should have done, and then we should have discussed the agenda and then gone on to make the amendment. I just looked it up. That's what I was trying to do in the first place. Okay, so I need a motion to move forward.
Make a motion that we adopt the agenda with the addition of the letter as amended.
Well, we already have two motions on, we have a motion and an amendment to the motion already on the floor.
The amendment is on the floor, so we need to take care of the amendment first.
You need to call for the vote, Mayor.
Yes, so I need to call for the vote on the amendment. So all those in favor of the amendment on the floor say aye.
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 Opposed? All those in favor of the original motion, now now you got me all confused because we didn't do it the way I was wanting.
The agenda as
Now, the motion with the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Okay, next, we have public comment. Oh, actually, next we have got emergency management. Yay, is Andrew on the line?
Yes, I am, Mayor.
Hold on, I'm being, hold on. Okay, so I need another, I'm being told I need another approval to sign the letter. So I need a motion from the council to sign the letter to go to Dow.
Shouldn't we be, if it's an agenda add, shouldn't we be discussing the letter at a later time? And that's when we would discuss and make a motion to sign the letter. But all we did was add it to the agenda.
I would concur.
Okay, they're looking for an approval of it now. Okay. Do you want to discuss, do you want to add it to the agenda or do you want it approved now? Council, do you have questions about the letter?
We need to find a place to tuck it and then discuss it.
Okay, we are going to add it to the agenda. It shouldn't take, if anybody's got any questions, let's add it to the very first thing. It's going to be right before the presentations. Let's do that. That way, if anybody's got any questions, it's added. Okay, emergency management. And Andrew, are you with us?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. And we're off to a rough start here today, but welcome. And hopefully you can give us an update on everything going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, Council Member, City Manager. My name is Andrew Stevens. I'm the Emergency Manager for Eastside Fire and Rescue. I would like to take the first minute of this report to quickly step away from COVID and touch on the fantastic response by the city's maintenance and operation crews, who over the holiday weekend worked around the clock to mitigate the impacts of this recent winter storm. I'd also like to thank the city's communication team for providing continual updates on the road and weather conditions, as well as safety tips for winter driving and outdoor recreation. Lastly, I'd like to thank the residents of Sammamish for limiting all unnecessary travel, which greatly assisted in the city's ability to service our roadways. The storm did not result in any major incidents or damages, but is a reminder to all that severe winter weather can certainly impact the region, and preparedness for such events begins with the individual. Regarding COVID, I think the topic on everyone's mind is the lack of access to vaccine. Over the past several weeks, I know that many of you have been personally contacted by individuals who qualify to receive a COVID-19 vaccine, but cannot either navigate the system or secure a reservation. While I understand the frustrations of every single one of those residents, I would like to highlight that this is not a problem specific to Sammamish, King County, or even Washington. This is a global problem of extremely high demand for an extremely limited amount of available vaccine. While it may not and it will not bring comfort to those still seeking a vaccine, I would like to highlight that the state of Washington has already administered over 1 million COVID-19 vaccinations, and there are 130 countries across the world who have yet to administer a single dose. So this is a huge concern because this is not just an American problem, but this is a global pandemic. So while the vaccine availability is not what many have expected, the numerous public and private partners involved in these efforts are all forging ahead and making progress. And every single day, more vaccines are finding their way into the arms of the most vulnerable. As I briefed 2 weeks ago, the county has begun operation of 2 mass vaccination sites in the cities of Auburn and Kent. These sites are delivering roughly 500 vaccines per day and can scale up to accommodate greater capacity as time goes on and access to vaccine becomes greater. An additional site was stood up by a public-private partnership of the hospitals, between hospitals and Microsoft, that was opened in Redmond. And they are targeting Medicare home care clients and their caregivers and other high-risk older adults who have not been previously able to secure vaccination. Eastside Fire and Rescue has established mobile vaccination teams that have been operating for the past 2 weeks in adult care homes and senior living facilities in Sammamish and Issaquah and across the Snoqualmie Valley. We are also working with human service personnel from every jurisdiction to identify and then schedule the mobile teams once they are authorized by King County Public Health to move beyond adult care facilities. Now, unfortunately, the planning of a mass vaccination site that was going to be held at Issaquah High School between the partners Swedish Hospital and Issaquah School District has stopped. This was due to multiple reasons, but primarily because our partners in Swedish had their allocations of vaccines cut due to statewide shortages, and the Issaquah School District was hoping to return some of their student extracurricular activities to the location, and we foresaw this would create problems. However, we have made considerable progress towards the establishment of a mid-volume drive-through vaccination site here on the east side. Right now, we are working with the Washington State Parks to secure the site location. We have begun obtaining quotes for the necessary logistical requirements and have drafted an agreement between the City of Sammamish, the City of Issaquah, and Eastside Fire and Rescue to cover the operational cost of this venture. While the agreement is still in draft form and being reviewed by all parties involved, Chief Clark has expressed to me that the Sammamish's cost share would equal roughly $450,000 to $500,000. We've been in frequent contact with our county and state partners. We're coordinating our efforts to establish this vaccination site and hoping to secure a dedicated line of vaccines once the regional supply increases. Our goal, if vaccine is obtained, is to have the site open for operations in early March. While it was expected that the city would be able to seek FEMA disaster assistance reimbursement for the vaccine-related operational expenses, I'd also like to ensure that I provide an update as to the remaining balance of CARES Act reimbursement that the city had previously earmarked for ongoing COVID-19 response and recovery. So to date, the city has spent roughly $2,138,000 of the $2.9 million that was reimbursed to the city, leaving roughly $750,000. That includes $187,000 on internal COVID-19 expenses, $215,000 on expenses necessary to ensure continuity of government, $1,211,000 on 2 rounds of small business and nonprofit grants, and $525,000 to support human services organizations assisting those most impacted. So lastly, I'd like to say for residents, we know this is frustrating, but if you're seeking information on vaccine availability or state and local COVID-19 updates or any sort of links to resources that will be able to provide you additional assistance, I urge you all to continue to visit the city's Connect Sammamish COVID-19 portal. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have questions for Andrew? Who's been working double time and doing a great job. Okay, I'm in the chat.
Gamblett.
Oh, who did I hear? Did I hear Councilmember Treen? Did you have a question?
Actually, Ken.
Yeah, I'm here. I have a question.
Okay, Councilmember Gamblin.
Actually, first was a comment to agree with our emergency manager. These guys with these plow trucks, just great job. I was obligated to be out a number of times, and they were just constantly out. Every time I was out, I must have sent them 5 or 6 times. So excellent job, especially in the arterials. Did a good job. A question to the emergency manager. I keep hearing numbers are going down significantly, and I hear statewide and countrywide, worldwide. Could you give us any insight into what our numbers are looking like in King County and Sammamish, if you have that information?
Yes, great question. The numbers have been decreasing. By no means are we out of the woods yet. This is an ongoing battle. In fact, Sammamish, as early as this month, in February, we had 2 additional fatalities. So our fatality count in Sammamish has actually increased to 11. The graph is actually reloading right now, but we have a little over 1,000 cases in Sammamish that have been confirmed. Looks like in King County, over 80,311 case count with around 1,300 fatalities. So this is definitely something that still needs to be on the top of everyone's radar. You still have widespread community spread across the nation, across Washington. You've seen some of the metrics being lowered to ensure, I guess, some continuity of trying to support the government and businesses and those efforts. However, I still also see a lot of people taking risks. I know a lot of folks were outside enjoying the snow and sledding over the weekend. I saw a lot of people not wearing masks. I saw a lot of people congregating that were not part of each other's pods or part of each other's families. This is a high-risk behavior, folks. So I think we have to practice, continue that responsibility, continue to practice all of the non-pharmaceutical mitigations. You're seeing more and more reports come out from the CDC and from the public health officials highlighting the risk, highlighting the variants that are more easily spread, the need for even double masking as a precaution because that can further prevent unneeded spread. I know besides vaccines, there's been a big topic about wanting to get kids back into school. So I urge residents to go look at the guidance on that because while it says that there can be low transmission rates within some of the school settings, it also highlights that for that to occur, there really needs to be low or no community spread within that community where that school is. So if you already have widespread community spread within your jurisdiction and you think that it's going to be safe to reopen a school, the likelihood that you will see transmission across those populations back and bringing it back home is high.
Great. Thank you. Last point I'll make, and then I'll get off. Good job, Andrew, on getting these drive-through sites. I know the Mass site might not have worked, but good job plugging along, looking at Lake Sammamish State Park. I think they're really going to help drive the solution to this. So thank you for your efforts on that.
You're welcome.
Okay, is there anybody else who's got questions for Andrew? Okay, great job over the weekend and everything, Andrew.
Christy, did you have a question?
Oh, okay.
Oh, but we
Hang on,
can't hear her.
Christy. Okay, Christy's audio is not working. Okay.
Mayor, if I can really quickly, for folks looking for additional data, not to plug Microsoft, but they have put out a AI for Health COVID dashboard, and it has a lot of great data. So for people looking for information on how it's spreading, on the delivered doses of vaccines and administered doses. So anybody who loves data, you can go there, you can see the visualizations. You can also get access to the data itself if you like to build your own graphs. So for anybody looking for that, again, it's AI for Health COVID data that you can go find out. And so for the data geeks out there, there's lots of good data to go look at.
There is, and the King County has got a great website that they've put together with the health department, and they've got, I was looking at it today, and they've got a tremendous amount of data on there, so yeah, they've got some great places to go. Okay, so
Absolutely.
Christy, can we hear
Yeah,
you?
sorry, I'm not, is not working. So I'm on my phone and my computer. I apologize if you're seeing me twice on here. I
Okay.
try and keeping one camera off. But Councilmember Gamblin had asked about numbers, and King County has an accessible database for everyone to look at, and I can email that out to everyone. But it also has vaccination data. So if anyone in the public is looking for information about rates and wants to get them down to the Sammamish level, you can do that. And as well as seeing people have their first COVID vaccination as well as their second. So good to have. I'll email it out to you so you all have the link.
Yeah, and all of those links, all the county dashboards are hyperlinked as resources within the city's Connect Sammamish page as well.
Yeah, and that's a great place. I was looking at it today when we were having the discussion with the county nurse, and you can see, it's interesting because you can see all the different places in the county and all the cities in the county where, and where all the vaccines have gone. So it's a great place it's a good resource. Okay, any other questions for Andrew? Okay, thank you, Andrew.
You're very welcome. Have a good evening, Mayor.
You too. Okay, next we have public comment. And pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-25, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual city council meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and public comment is able to be submitted. Written public comment will be accepted until 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Submit your written comments by email to the city clerk, lhatchie@sammamish.us, and the city council at citycouncil@sammamish.us. Verbal comment, up to 3 minutes of verbal comment may be provided per person live during the meeting. Call the following number and input the access code when prompted by 6:30 p.m. the day of the meeting. The phone number 1-571-317-3122 and the access code of 929-348-197. Lita?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Currently, we have one caller on the line. I will unmute the caller in the order that they have joined the meeting. When it's your turn to call, to speak, you will hear an automated voice say unmuted, and then you will have 3 minutes to provide comment. 15 seconds before your 3 minutes is complete, I will provide a time warning. At 3 minutes, you will be muted. Please start your comment by stating your name and the city you live in for the record. I will now unmute the first caller. Okay, you're unmuted.
Hi, I don't have any verbal comment tonight, but I wanted to let you know that TV 21 Broadcasting at least doesn't have any audio from where I am. I cannot get the live stream working, so the only way to listen is via phone tonight as far as I can figure it out. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That is all the callers we have for tonight.
Okay. Okay, we are going to check on that. Actually, Mike's going right now to go check on that. Okay.
Karen, folks should be able to watch if they want to live stream it on YouTube. On the city's YouTube channel, though. That's another option.
Okay, so for anybody who, I'm going to repeat that. Deputy Mayor just said that for anybody who wants to live stream it and watch it there, you can do it on the YouTube. And no, you gave me the YouTube. So if you go to the city YouTube, you should be able to live stream it in. Is that correct, Christy? Okay. And I want to thank the caller for letting us know that. Okay, next up is the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. As we are doing that, we are pulling the minutes from the consent calendar. Lisa has pulled the minutes from the consent calendar as she was reviewing them. So we will be approving the consent calendar minus number 5.
Okay, so then I would have to reframe my motion. I would move that we approve the consent less item number 5.
Yes, you would. Thank you. And
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion on that? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Perfect. Okay, now going backwards before presentations, we were going to go back and address the letter that was sent out to everybody today. And does everybody have the letter that was sent out to everyone today? Okay, what they're looking for is an approval for the mayor to sign the letter that is going to go out to Dow Constantine. So, Mike, do you want to speak to the letter? I think everybody's got it, so I don't think you need to read it.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, and Mr. City Manager Mike Suggs, Senior Management Analyst. As Dave has already mentioned earlier in the meeting, this addition to the agenda is for the council to consider authorizing the mayor to sign a joint letter with the city of Issaquah as well as Eastside Fire and Rescue, and this would be sent to King County Executive Dow Constantine. The content of the letter is urging the county to support the request made by EFR for approval to operate a mid-volume vehicular COVID-19 vaccination site at Lake Sammamish State Park. And Andrew Stevens, emergency manager at EFR, is on the line to answer any questions if there are any. And again, this request is for the city council to authorize the mayor to sign the joint letter to Executive Constantine regarding the vaccination site. And I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay,
Move approval of signing the letter.
okay, and I see Councilmember Trian, you a second, I guess?
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve the signing of a joint letter to Executive Constantine regarding the EFNR's request for approval to operate a vehicular COVID-19 vaccination site at Lake Sammamish State Park in conjunction with Issaquah, the city of Issaquah.
It's been moved already.
Okay,
Second.
second. Okay, we have a first and a second. Okay, any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. Okay, now we can move on and to presentations and proclamations. First presentation we have this evening is, and I thought I saw him on here, was from Russell Joe. There he is.
Good evening. Madam Mayor, members of the council, it's a pleasure to speak to you this evening. I wanted to touch upon a reroute that's going to be implemented in the city of Sammamish starting March 1st. I know that City Manager Dave Rudak gave you a briefing on November 10th. That was probably a lifetime ago for some of us. So he gave the sketch in the council packet that you have, which shows the different dates that items will be produced. Tonight, I'll show you some of those items that you can take a look at those and make sure that they are filling the need for getting notice out to the citizens for this reroute. By the time the presentation is over, we should have, I think I counted 8 total touch points for citizens in the city to be aware of the upcoming reroute.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen here. And I hope it works. Oops. Can everyone see the presentation there?
Yes, we have it, Russell.
Fantastic, thank you. So this is an informational briefing for you today. In the council packet, there are 3 reasons: the rationale for the reroute now, population growth in Sammamish is occurring, or we anticipate will occur in the future. And so the reroute is designed to account for that future growth and development that potentially could be coming to the plateau. Also, there was a need to balance the routes across geographical areas to allow the drivers to be able to do the same pace of work each day for safety reasons, so they don't feel that they have to speed up and perhaps compromise safety because they have a very heavy day on any particular day up for service in Sammamish. So we wanted to balance those routes across the geographic areas. And then, of course, there was a need to make the routes more efficient. We hope that by doing this, we are going to eliminate some of the cross traffic or the traffic up and down 228 and some of your major arterials. When we reduce those trips, it does lead to a reduction in greenhouse gases, and we think that's a positive thing for a city like Sammamish, which is trying to be green. So February 1st, after we received information from the city that they would allow us to go forward with the reroute, and we had agreed on a plan, we immediately put up this website announcement. It tells the citizens when they come to the website general information about the reroute, and allows them to click this button here to get a map of the city that they can then compare and see, you know, I live on 228 right by Trader Joe's. What's my day of pickup going to be? And that can be found at republicservicesnw.com. So here are the milestones that we were talking about that's in your packet. We, of course, did the website early in February. The mail date changes are scheduled to land in the mailboxes of citizens on February 15th. We mailed those out early on February 5th, so hopefully everyone has those now. We will do robocalls to notify impacted customers of the day change, and those calls will be going out February 22nd. There'll be tags that we'll be putting on the carts for customers to make them aware that their day is changing. The total impact for the city is about 50% to 55% of the citizens. We anticipate about 9,000 customers having to change their day from a Tuesday to a Thursday, if you will. The second round of robocalls will go out the week of February 28th to March 4th, and those calls will be 24 hours before the new pickup. So hopefully people will be sitting at home, they'll get the call, and they'll be able to get their garbage cans and their recycle cans out to the curb that next morning. Now, the emails to customers, we originally had in the November 10th packet, I think we had a date of February 8th on there. We made the decision to move this to February 24th, just so it was more timely in the sense of, the citizens will be getting the postcard, they'll be getting the phone calls, the cart tag will come out there, and then the email will help augment and support that effort. We felt that if citizens got the email on February 8th, some 20 days before the reroute, that email might be lost in the shuffle. This way, it's more of a resource that customers can look to as they are getting the collateral from us along the way. Then we will implement the route on March 1st, 2021. We had great collaboration and cooperation with the city from January to the present, and I'll touch on some of the items and things that they did to help get notice out to the citizens. So here's what the tag looks like. It's also the postcard that I referenced earlier. This red circle up here at the top above attention is designed to latch on to the cart. So our crews will be going out and tagging carts after the garbage gets picked up or other commodities get picked up, and they'll tag the cart to let people know that their day is changing. This one in particular is a Monday change. They're encouraged to have their carts out by 7 a.m. The change goes into effect March 1st, the week of March 1st. And there's also a telephone number and website so they can reach out to us for additional information should they need it. The city, as I mentioned, was very helpful in helping us get the word out. This is a current news release from February 1st that the city put on their website. It hits all the highlight points that were in the cart tag and the postcard that I just referenced in the previous slide. I'd also like to thank the city for getting this in the city newsletter, the January, February newsletter. There was a nice section about Republic Services and how to recycle right. And then this collection date change notice was there as well to let citizens know that a change is coming and they should be ready to make adjustments when they get the postcard and to look out for additional communications from us along the way. I'll take some questions now, but I'll just briefly summarize that we are going to reach out 8 times to people through various communication avenues. So the city did 2 of the pieces. Your website with the news release. Thank you, Celia Wu, and the communications manager over there at the city of Sammamish. And you also did the newsletter. So that's 2. We did a website that I hit at the very first slide or the second slide in the presentation. postcard that's going out. It should be in mailboxes right now. The cart tag that'll be put on. The week that we had targeted was February 22nd to the 26th. We are going to try to do some cart tagging perhaps this week, 17th through the 19th. So we're trying to get a little head start on that so that people get notice. We'll do 2 robocalls, and then we'll do the email, making 8 contacts total. So we think that if people are using a computer or using mail, they're going to get hit with the information. If people are, at home and just with a phone, they're going to get the robocall. We hope that it's a robust effort to get full contact with the citizens so they're aware that this change is coming. Are there any questions?
We do. We've got, first one here, we've got Councilmember Gamblin.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that information. I looked at what you had put out earlier and studied a little bit, and is there any net difference in level or frequency of service to any of the residents or the neighborhoods?
All citizens have weekly garbage and weekly recycling. The yard waste also is by the customers too. So when you say level of service, are you talking about the volume that they can put out?
No, just comparing what we have now to what will happen. It seems like what we're putting forward is simply just a change in scheduling and routes. I just want to make sure it's not a change in any type of service also.
I see. No, I understand now. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, there is no change in the level of service or the frequency of visits for our trucks to individual neighborhoods or any region in Sammamish itself.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Okay, in the chat box, I don't see anybody else. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, well, our postcard came in the mail. I already hung it up, so.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for letting me brief you this evening. We're set to make this transition go smoothly, and as our company motto says, we'll handle it from here. But you all have my phone number and email address, and please feel free to reach out to me should you have any questions or concerns. Thank you for your attention and time tonight.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up we have a proclamation on World Spay Day. Deputy Mayor, do you want to read that?
Sure, I can do that, especially since we have one on the books, but he wasn't able to get in for February 23rd because local vet is very full, and he is out in March now. But anyway, so World Spay Day, February 23rd, 2021, whereas pets provide companionship to 65% of U.S. households, and whereas 2.4 million healthy and adoptable cats and dogs are put down in animal shelters each year due to a lack of critical resources and public awareness, and whereas nearly 90% of pets living in poverty and 98% of community feral and stray cats are unaltered, and whereas spaying and neutering has been shown to dramatically reduce the number of animals who are put down in animal shelters, and whereas programs exist to assist with the cost of spaying and neutering pets living in poverty and community cats, and whereas veterinarians, national and local animal protection organizations, and private citizens work together to advocate the spaying and neutering of pets and community cats through World Spay Day in the United States and throughout the world 2021. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that February 23rd, 2021 is designated World Spay Day. Mayor Karen Moran, on behalf of the City Council, is calling upon the people of Sammamish to observe the day by having their pets spayed or neutered, or by sponsoring the spaying and neuter of a pet in need.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have got unfinished business. And who will be handling, Mike, is that you? Yep, this is the work plan.
Good evening once again, Madam Mayor, Council, and Mr. City Manager. Mike Sugg, Senior Management Analyst, and here tonight to talk about the work plan and retreat. So during the second day of the City Council retreat on January 22nd, the Council reviewed a list of potential work plan items for the year. Council discussed each of the 8 focus areas in the plan and asked questions and provided feedback on the various items. Much of the work plan discussion during the retreat centered around seven recommended but unbudgeted projects, plus the Town Center Regional Stormwater Plan. These included 2 finance projects, F7 and F8, 3 administrative and organizational projects, G6, G7, and G8, and 3 stormwater projects, which are E8, E9, and SW01. Council indicated interest in adding all of these items, so they have been included in the updated work plan shown in Exhibit 1 to the agenda bill. Most of the added projects are shown without a timeline because the specific details of these projects are still being determined. And as we discussed during the retreat, staff will be going out, gathering proposals, developing schedules, and then coming back to the council in the coming weeks and months. As mentioned, the updated work plan, which incorporates the council's feedback from the retreat, is included as Exhibit 1. Following discussion, the council can consider approving it this evening, and this will allow staff to begin going through the council's long-term calendar and populating those work plan items into the various meetings this year. The second piece of tonight's discussion relates to the council's 2021 priorities. But rather than jumping into that, maybe we could first start with the work plan piece and any discussion there, and then touch on the priorities afterwards. So I do have the work plan ready to pull up if there are any remaining questions that we didn't get to address during the retreat. And with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor for any questions or discussion on the work plan.
Okay, Council, I just put work plan so that I could separate. Okay, so I'm looking to see if anybody's got any questions on the work plan. So, okay. So, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. For both capital projects as well as under studies, plans, and other operating items, we talk about the ADA transition plan, which I think is obviously very important. But I'm curious as to how the city is tackling existing basically right-of-way issues that we have. I mean, I saw one today and tweeted about it, which was a truck that was parked on a sidewalk, and the company was very responsive and moved the truck. But we have trash cans, and we have cars, and we have basketball hoops that perpetuate our sidewalks all over the city, and it's such an easy win for us, and I'm not sure if that is embedded in this at all or what, because that's an inexpensive thing to do. Is it falls under code compliance, but is that embedded in this at all, or no? I know we've talked about this, but is it totally separate?
Mayor, I'll attempt to answer that.
Right now, I would say that we are on we do reactive code enforcement. It's assumed that when an issue comes up that we'll tackle it, but we don't have a proactive program for that.
And if I could just add to that.
That might be something that we want to look at as far as, when we're talking about barrier removal, frankly, we had Republic Services on the line. Maybe we should have asked them for their assistance, because a lot of times their garbage haulers come back through and put garbage cans right back up on the sidewalk, which from an ADA standpoint is kind of a no-go. It's a $71 ticket in Sammamish to park your car on the sidewalk anyway. But we are creating barriers for people that have mobility issues. And frankly, that could be a mother pushing a child in a stroller, or someone in a wheelchair. But I think, there's a win to be had here too with proactive code compliance, although I do recognize the fact that our code compliance officers are probably very busy chasing down a lot of different issues, but I'm just curious if that can be parked under this at all or not.
Well, I'll go ahead and have Mike respond. He had some additional things, but I would advise the council
that if we want to take that under study, that really is one that is a budgetary impact. If you want to be proactive in code enforcement, it takes resources, and right now we just do it like all code enforcement is done on a reactive basis. I think having our folks be cognizant, more cognizant, and we could be reactive in that sense, but otherwise it is a large budgetary impact that we need to take up during the budget.
Yeah, so the ADA transition plan is currently scheduled to come back to council on March 16th. And you've all seen it, I think, twice at this point, draft versions. And it does touch on those temporary barriers, such as the garbage cans, the recycling bins, the basketball hoops. But really, its main focus is on the permanent barriers. So your crosswalks, your curb ramps, sidewalks, push buttons, those types of things, and allocating money and a schedule to removing those. But certainly, you know, the types of barriers that you're referring to pose a very real challenge day to day. And I think that's where Dave was kind of mentioning the code compliance piece comes into play. But it is mentioned in the plan, but it's more about those permanent accessibility barriers that were surveyed in the city.
Okay. One other question I have is relative to capital projects, and this is somewhat based on the conversation that we had last week relative to Inglewood Middle School versus Beaver Lake. And according to the plan here, we do have Beaver Lake on its coming back in July. Is that time frame still relevant considering council feedback from last week, or have we kick that down a little further in the year? I'm just kind of curious if that's still going to come to council in July.
And I can speak.
Go ahead, Anjali.
Right. So as far as I recall, that date is just to bring a consultant selection to council. No work would have been done at that point.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And then maybe I'm not seeing it here, Anjali, but I know you had mentioned it over email, and that was Beaton Hill.
Yes, and that's because the actual work on that will start next year. So if it's not
next
shown
year.
on
Okay, not this year. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess let me ask the question a different way. If council opts not to do anything with Inglewood Middle School, is there bandwidth within the Parks Department to move up studying Beaton Hill and master planning that, or no?
I would just caution, Anjali, you can, if you've got a good response, but think about what that is when we can come back at the next meeting. I don't want you to overcommit.
Yeah. No, we haven't looked at that, so I will have to regroup with the team, Dave. So.
Okay, well, the reason I'm asking now in advance of next week is that if the ask of council here is to pass the work plan, that we have this thing kind of hanging out there. I mean, maybe we just need to make an amendment to the work plan before passing it, not knowing what we're doing relative to Beaton Hill versus Inglewood. Is that fair?
Well, I think I understand. It's difficult to sort of parse it out. What we're looking for is a general consensus on a direction to move. And if there are exceptions to that, then let us go back and look at some of those exceptions and provide some direction back. I'd hate to see everything hung up with us just coming back to answer on 2 or 3 different projects in general, because the council can always readjust their priorities. Because we might come back after doing some engineering studies and or architectural reviews, and the price of something is now more focused, it's higher than what you originally thought, and then you might want to deprioritize it, or you might want to enhance its priority.
I think that was my ask, and maybe I didn't ask it very well. I'm asking if the ask of council is to pass the work plan tonight, do you then want us to make an amendment to it, not knowing, because we kind of left things hanging out there last week between Beaton Hill and the Inglewood Middle School parks?
I would say yes, but in a formal way, if you'd like, in a less formal way. I mean, it's a guideline for staff, it's a guideline for council, and council body always has the prerogative to adjust it and modify it.
Okay.
Councilmember Ross?
Thank you. On item F8, multi-year financial forecast, I wanted to ask, and this may be a go back or a scoping go back, but I've been reading and getting notes that the federal recognition for financial excellence that we've received just about every year, or every year in recent memory, has enhanced the requirements. I think one of the requirements enhancements is multi-year forecasting. I've heard anywhere up to 10-year forecast or budgeting. And my ask is that when we scope out F8 and any other requirements related to the federal recognition, that we have our teams, our finance team, make sure that in our work plan, that if we're doing a forecast, we're doing the right length of forecast that aligns with the new requirements for federal recognition so that we stay on course for that. And if there's any other new requirements that need to be added and addressed.
Well, if our finance director is available, I can have him speak to that. But separately, I brought up the idea of a multi-year forecast, that I would get a cost on that. And I think we agreed on going out and getting a cost and bringing that back. I don't know, Aaron, are you on the call tonight? No, he's not. So we can take a memo on that and get back to you, Councilman, and the rest of the council on regards to the requirements there in that multi-year financial forecast.
Right, because it's not only a cost, but it's also a strategic management decision on whether we want to keep pursuing that honor and best practices, as they would call them. So make sure when you're looking at it, you're looking at it in terms of that as well, not just a shortened version, if that's the case.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure what is required for that, but what I had proposed to the council was, yes, in keeping with best practices, and if you wanted to find a solution to getting to a strategically and sustainable budget, we needed to do that multi-year forecasting.
To be clear, this item was developed before I read or learned about potential changes to the federal enhanced requirements. So I'm asking us, okay, we've started some thought on this. Do we need to go further than we initially planned or thought out in our strategy sessions earlier and really kill two birds with one stone, a multi-year forecast and being in line with new requirements, if any, with the federal recognition?
Okay, well, yeah, we'll follow up with Aaron when he returns from vacation. And the deputy finance director may have some answers for us that we can dig up in the next few days from GFOA.
Councilmember, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, if we had to make a decision on the work plan related to the parks, I'm kind of a little bit still fuzzy on the answer that Christy got, Deputy Mayor. But I'm not advocating that we pursue Inglewood, and I think the last meeting we talked about this. We had more than half of the people not wanting to pursue the Inglewood plan in the near term, that we understand it would be put off by a year. And so I want to make sure we're clear on that we don't just jump in and put that in the work plan and think we're starting right away. Because if we want to take a formal vote on it today, I'm sure you'll have the question is, are you comfortable delaying Inglewood a year? I counted heads that said more than half, or 3.5 to 2.5, perhaps, probably 4 to 2 said no. Yes, let's delay it. We are comfortable. So I'm concerned about that work plan, or putting that into the near-term work plan.
Okay, well, I'll have Anjali speak to it, but I think the vote was 3-3, and she said we would come back with some additional information, is what she and I discussed.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree. It was not 3-3, and if you want to poll 6 of us again, go ahead and prove me wrong. But we had one council member was counted as one of the 3 get started right away, only putting some commentary on what is unacceptable, which is the $10.7 million approach, may consider the other approach, but did not say start right away.
Well, I can say my recall isn't is quite on point, so I just look to others. That's fine. Otherwise, I would say on that particular issue, then, as I mentioned to Council Member, we wanted to get a general consensus, and there could be exceptions to it. Inglewood Park seems to be an exception, but I don't have a specific answer. But Anjali, do you?
No, I will just say that all staff is doing is trying to collect some information on the questions council had, and we'll bring them back to council. And at that point, if the decision is still to delay it, we can do that. If council wants to decide sooner, before, it's a lot of questions. It will take us some time and effort to pull the responses together. So that would be council's decision. If you want to make a decision before we come back to you with the information or not. And at that point, we will revisit what's on our calendar. We are still operating with 1 vacancy in terms of staffing. And so if there's something else you want us to work on, we'll put our heads together and do the best we can. Does that answer the question, or did I?
And it may, with more information, may even be setting aside and having other options. That's why it's important to include Beaton Park in the discussion, so we have a total field strategy in front of us to evaluate, so we can get the right decision for the city. Doing one at a time is not a good business practice, and I think we'll end up perhaps spending money on something that may not have optimized our results. So I'm concerned about that and the direction this is going.
Well, we certainly stand ready to take direction from the council. I think Anjali's response on Beaton Park that was in the plan wasn't to start looking at it until next year based on the other workload. We can go back and reevaluate that. But currently, we don't have any information on it, and not prepared to pursue cost estimates because there's a lot involved with that. But we can readjust our work schedules. I just need a consensus and direction on that. Anjali, where was that? It was in 2022 that you were start to evaluate Beaton Park?
That's right. And Beaton Hill is what's on the plan is it's a master plan. So the first step we would do is actually advertise a request for proposals and go through a consultant selection. That typically takes a few months. And then we start a public process. And so for master plans, trying to come up with a survey of questions to your community, and then we go to, I think we'll typically start with council. You come to you and ask you, what are your hopes, dreams, and concerns for this parcel? And then we do the same with our Parks Commission, and we do the same with the community. And then we have 3 sets of touch points. We have a model master plan process that was adopted by council many, many years ago. And so we follow that same process. But to even get a consultant for the project and get started with any public process, there's a lead time of several months.
Anjali, what bothers me about this is we keep doing them one at a time. And I frankly think this is one time where we need an integrated master plan, which we consider Beaton Park, Beaver Lake, and Inglewood all at the same time. A master plan. How do you play those three opportunities together, and how to best utilize those three options and for a cost-effective maximizing our field capacity and utilization. And to do them one at a time, we continuously get ourselves in delays, and we get ourselves into a path that doesn't make the best decision for the city, in my opinion.
And the athletic field study intended to do that, and it did not take into account Beaton Hill, but it did that for Beaver Lake. So we do have some preliminary costs, and we do have some options, but it's not as detailed as the feasibility at Inglewood. And the only reason Inglewood went sooner is because it was already on the CIP. It wasn't like staff made a decision to do that ahead of Beaver Lake. It was just the way the order was. But the athletic field study did come up with baseline costs for both Beaver Lake and Inglewood, and we can show you where we're at with that. It's not as developed as Inglewood. To get a feasibility going for Beaver Lake Park will not take as long as Beaton Hill. We were hoping to do a consultant selection jointly for the turf replacement at Eastlake High School and for Beaton Hill, trying to combine a few projects and put an RFP out on that. We could just use the same athletic, consultant we are using on Inglewood. We could use the same consultant to do a feasibility for Beaver Lake Park, because that one has completed the master plan process.
Well, I've said what I wanted to convey. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Ross, I appreciate your concerns. Just to clarify, I don't think that Beaton Hill is going to offer us a lot of fields. At most, I believe it would be 2 baseball fields at most. So I appreciate your concerns, but I think that we asked Anjali last week for some data on Beaver Lake Park and Inglewood Park to kind of make a decision between those. I mean, honestly, the field shortages that we have across the city, we could do all 3 of those and probably still not have enough fields for the community. So I don't really think it's an either or. It really is a which one do we want to tackle first, and where can we, kind of get the biggest bang for our buck and maybe get some things moving, because it's been a long time since we've brought new fields online, and we really do need more fields for the community. So I would just throw that out there. I don't think it's that staff is trying to skirt anything. We only just purchased Beaton Hill Park last year, so that's probably going to take time to get all this work done. And I don't know that we should hold up and not do anything on any fields until that work is done. I think we can make a pretty good decision between Inglewood and Beaver Lake Park without that information completed. That's just my 2 cents. But my real concern about the work plan is one of the things that isn't anywhere on the work plan, unless I missed it, is really addressing a full-on sustainability plan and really looking at any work that is going to address how we might start to measure and address some of our commitments that we signed on with the K4C. The K4C, the King County Climate Collaboration for Cities, and while it doesn't specify what any individual city needs to do, we did sign on for the goals of the K4C, which is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And so, there is work that's going on to start to measure, right? They have a toolkit where we can start to measure our greenhouse gas emissions, and where we can start to make sure we're looking at work that would help us reduce those. most of our work would be in the areas of transportation and our built environment. We don't really have a lot of industry that's probably contributing to our greenhouse gas emissions here. But I would like to see over the next 2 years that we have at least something that looks at kind of getting that started, because again, I think that that is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take some lead time. And so is that something, Mr. City Manager, that is addressed in any of our work plan items already, where we'll start to measure our greenhouse gas emissions so we can start to figure out where we might be able to do some work to reduce them?
My honest response is I don't think so. But
Okay.
I could have Anjali speak to it. I think it makes sense to add that into a consultant's review on that particular park as a project, because I think all of these parks, anything we do going forward, needs to have a maintenance element to it, because it's a lot of fun and engagement to create something, to acquire it, to see it get built. It's the maintenance part that always gets dropped off. So I think that's where that particular type of thing can be tied in. And if that's the council's wishes going forward, we can incorporate perhaps some consulting work into our budgetary asks next year to be able to start to address that. But it may not be a significant ask. So maybe that's something I can talk with staff about, how we address that.
We might be mixing modes, because I don't know that our parks are a big contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's more the transportation and the built environment. So that's going to address city buildings, as well as, looking at our building codes, and are there things we can incorporate in our building codes around our built environment, and then our transportation system, and how we might be able to reduce it there. So I'm not sure that it has anything to do with the park. It's really a separate issue from the building out of the parks.
Okay, well, I made my right response responsive to the issue of parks, because that's the subject matter we're on, and we use mowers and that sort of thing, and maybe there's an element there. The transportation facilities is a whole nother animal, and I'm sure we're not doing that right now.
Okay. I would like to throw it out there that, I really think we need to be looking at that. Any work we're going to do to start to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help King County to achieve the reductions that they're looking at for 2035, we really need to be doing those studies. A lot of those projects are probably going to be pretty long-term projects. So I would think that at a minimum, we need to start measuring, because we don't really know where to focus any of our energies right now. And, if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. So I would love to see us add a work item that says that we would work with King County and Mayor. We were contacted by the League of Women Voters. They're working on an effort to try to get a number of cities where they'll do some of the work to implement the toolkit, so that cities can start to measure their greenhouse gas emissions and make that be much lower cost, because we can pool our resources together. And I believe you shared that information with the council and the city manager probably a month or so ago. So if there's support for that, I would like to see us add that to the work plan. I know we can't get you to commit to, when that might be able to occur, but if it's not on the work plan, it certainly isn't going to get looked at. And again, that's going to be something that is long-term, and just getting the measurements so we know where that's occurring and what our greenhouse gas emissions are, to me is a pretty important step for the environment.
And Mayor and Council,
So is that something I need to make a motion for, or?
I would ask the Pam and the group to think about it from the standpoint of conceptually where we might go with it, because we just went through a budgetary process. This has budgetary impacts. I wouldn't know where to begin to quantify it, but we can take a look as we're going through the year, but I don't want to commit to any hard and fast reporting or implementation, because I'm not sure where to begin and what the budgetary impacts are. Now, I'm starting to be redundant, but all of these things are topics that we should be formulating in anticipation of budgetary impact and budgetary work plans.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask that we at least consider it, and because I feel like the budgetary impacts over the long haul of not doing this work are going to be huge. And so, we know that there are very negative impacts to the environment. We know that there are very negative impacts to people's health. And so, and I believe, Mayor, I don't know that we got any numbers from the League of Women Voters, but because they were looking to do this across a number of cities, it was going to be a fairly small dollar amount to implement the toolkit to just do the measurement by consolidating the work across multiple cities. Is that your understanding, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, but there was a number of things that we needed to do first, so I'll go back and go through that information. There was information we needed to gather first, but I'll go back and review that information.
Okay, I'd like to see us just put it on there maybe as a placeholder, Mr. City Manager, so that it doesn't get lost, because the importance of this to the environment and the long-term effects, I just don't think we can put it off another 2 years. I just don't think we can wait that long.
So are you making a motion to bring it up to put it onto the work plan?
Sure, I move that we at least add a placeholder for the implementation of the K4C measurement. Any support for that?
I'll second it so we can have a discussion about it, but.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It looks like there are some questions.
Okay, so going to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I think this would be it's challenging to park in here now. I think it didn't end up on the work plan. Councilmember Stewart, I don't remember if you brought this up during the retreat or not. I think if it had support, then it would be on this list. And I'm not saying I don't support it, but I do not support adding it this year. We had staff tell us and verbalize at the time that we have a very ambitious workload. We're being asked to kind of prioritize things now anyway, because I suspect some of the stuff is going to get kicked off and we're not going to get to it. That being said, I think the more appropriate time to try and embed a sustainability master plan is during our comp plan process. And part of that process is kicking off with this work plan as we start to engage the community on it. And I think that's where we would be better off trying to plan our path forward on a sustainability master plan. I understand that doesn't serve your purpose for kicking it down the road a couple of years, but I just don't know that we have staffing. I think the city manager made the point about we did not budget for this. So I think, even if we circled back to it at the mid-buy budget, that would be a more appropriate time than trying to tuck it in here because it's not budgeted for at this time. So that's my take.
Okay, Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, this is for this year's work plan. I was looking at so where I went with this was to look at the 3-year calendar and looking at end of third quarter 2022 or even into 2023 for dealing with some of the issues that would do greenhouse reduction. But I would add this to the conversation that if we actually wanted to make a serious, or at least a start, we already have the urban forest plan that if we just changed some of the original strategies and just made conservation of our trees a higher priority and not taking out our legacy trees and replacing them with street trees, the CO2 that would be being picked up by the trees and doing the filtering of the air would be as important as any other measurement that we might be taking. So I look at that as that we do have some of that ability if we wanted to go back with the Planning Commission and direct them to change the urban forestry plan and then approve its implementation so that it's something that actually is conserving our legacy trees. We'd be meeting that goal that you're talking about, Councilmember Stewart. And then I guess the other one would be towards the city manager in that, and I don't know if we're replacing our vehicles with electric vehicles, but I know that, you know, on our budget, there are always the purchasing of vehicles. And so that would be one. And then we're going to do two projects. We're looking at the work plan with the fire stations. And so there's another avenue which we could look at how do we make them more efficient, which I believe some of the upgrading that we're going to do there will also be doing the efficiency of heating and cooling, which is probably the #1 cause of emissions that we need to take care of, or the use of energy. So, which creates other emissions at a different level when we talk about the environmental impact. So, those are my words of recommendation. I would just keep we're looking at a work plan that we need to approve going forward that we see here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Gamblin.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So on the motion, I wouldn't support the motion. You know, the K4C is great, and it's worthwhile to have out there. But quite frankly, you know, talking about what we can do on transportation to get ahead of it right now is really a slippery slope. You know, I pulled up some information that, you know, Metro is preparing over the next 2 years to reduce services by 20 to 30% from previous levels, and their capital spending is going to reduce by 30 to 40%. So we need to be realistic when we're saying, let's look at transit orientation or where can we improve transit. That's not our wheelhouse, and there's already clear proof out here that transit is not being looked at to increase it. It's being looked to be significantly reduced. So again, I'm all for sustainability and looking what we can do on global warming, but for us to take our important time on this plan this year to make progress on this when King County's or Metro's already saying it's going to be reduced. Let's see what's going to happen with that first before we ask our staff to do a bunch of work on doing that. And then, Madam Mayor, when we get back to it, I'd like to speak on what we have right now. So anyway, that's on the motion.
Okay, next I've got Councilmember Ross.
Thank you. I kind of look at this like a chart we had a couple of years ago where we had finance as integrated in everything we do in the center of the chart. I look at this as the same thing. Environmental choices are the central part of every decision we make. We're going to have consultants that are going to suggest environmental friendly and cost effective solutions as alternatives throughout our development of our projects. So we're not going to go from 0 to something in 2 years. We're going to be incrementally, continuously making environmental improvements. And it's in the forefront of everybody's mind as we work through our project alternatives. So for that reason, I don't see this as a separate work plan item.
Okay, we've already had Councilmember Gamblin, so Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think what Councilmember Gamblin and Councilmember Ross just said, I actually think that actually supports the need, and even Councilmember Treen supports the need to do the measurement. So just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that we actually do take any action around transit. I said that we should be measuring what our transportation system is contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. And while Councilmember Trine, I think you brought up some great points around trees, what we don't know is we actually don't have the numbers to know how much we're contributing in terms of transportation, and that is all parts of our transportation and our built environment, and businesses. To be honest, we don't have industry per se, but we do have some businesses, and to really understand what they're contributing so that we know where are some of the places where work should be looked at, and to Councilmember Ross's point, to make it an integral part of everything we do so that we know if we're doing a project like with the firehouse refurbishment, is that a place where it's worth spending money because we know that there's a building that's contributing a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions, and if we're going to refurbish it and it's going to last 20 or 30 years, that it's worth spending that money now, because over that time period it will more than pay for itself, both financially and environmentally. So again, I'm not asking that we actually do any take on any projects to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, but that we do the measurement, because if we don't measure it, we don't know where we need to focus. We don't know where it makes sense to put our efforts and have consultants take a closer look at something, because we don't know what our big greenhouse gas emitters are, and we don't know where the biggest bang for our buck would be. So this is really just about getting that measurement, and we can say that, we don't know, we can't do anything, we just have to keep waiting. But the crisis is now, and if we wait too much longer, then the ability for us to make changes is going to be more expensive, and we're going to have to take even more drastic actions to curtail that. So I'm merely saying that I think we should look into, add an action item to figure out how much it might cost to implement the toolkit that King County has provided for us, so that we can start taking some measurements and have some idea of how much greenhouse gases, what that load is that we are contributing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions here in the city. So I'll leave it at that. Obviously, there's not support for this, but if we really are serious about the environment, measuring how we're impacting the environment is absolutely the first step.
I just wanted to add that I think that we need to go back and Councilmember Stewart, we need to go back. We need to get the information that we had from the League of Women Voters, not League of Women Voters, but from the group from the.
It was League of Women Voters.
Was it? Okay,
yeah.
So we need to get that information because I think there was information how we could do. Some of that stuff was free. Some of the stuff they actually we need to bring that information forward. There are some high school kids that contacted the city. We've sent them off to work with the fire district to make sure that the new fire station that's being built is, everything done is under these wonderful new standards, following the greenhouse standards. And so I think what we really need to do is this belongs in the comp plan. And so we need to, and I agree with Deputy Mayor, it does belong on the comp plan, so we kind of need to back up, spend some time researching it. And something we had talked about that I told you we really needed to get together on is writing down what we expected and what we wanted to see, and I think that's what we really need to do. Rather than...
I got that list started. I'll send it to you next week.
Perfect. Okay, and this, okay, so going back to the work plan.
I think we have to vote on the motion. Sorry.
Okay, we had a, what was the motion that was, motion on the floor?
The motion was to add a placeholder on the work plan for implementing the toolkit to measure greenhouse gas emissions in the city.
There you go. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I would say aye. Okay, and opposed?
Nay. Nay.
Nay.
Okay. So that would be a 4-2. Okay, so going back to the work plan, to the original questions on the work plan. Did we have any other topics that were not covered under the questions? We were off on the topic of the ball fields and Beaton and Inglewood.
Mayor, can you check the chat?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat now.
I think we had a queue before Councilmember Stewart's motion. I think Ken was in there.
Okay,
Aaron,
Ken or Ken?
I was in there.
Ken, were you in there?
Ken was in there.
Okay.
That was prior to the motion.
So Ken, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. So I guess this is maybe a procedural question. Our last meeting, I'll agree with Councilmember Ross that there did not seem to be a lot of excitement on actively pursuing the Englewood Middle School synthetic turf field overlay at this point. And my question, I guess, is where do we come to agreement on a question like this when we don't vote? How does the staff know what to do and what not to do when they're basically trying to figure out what the council wants without some type of show of hands? Staff on this said they thought it was a 3-3, so they should proceed. Actually, I think a 3-3 means you don't proceed, but given that doesn't really matter. How does the staff, how as a council do we want to instruct staff to know what the will of the council is on a situation like this where we don't show a show of hands? And I seem to think that it was, not a popular item, but, maybe I'm wrong. So again, my question is to the council and maybe the mayor, maybe the city manager on a question like this, where here it is again as in February and March pursued. How do we decide whether we do that or not?
Mayor, if I could attempt to answer that. It is very difficult. It is very difficult for staff. Last week, or at the last meeting, what I think I recall, and it's just what I think I recall, and I'm open to being challenged by it. I'm not trying to say somebody's right, somebody's wrong, but there was a lot of angst, and there was discussion about delaying for a year and going and having staff go back. But it was a question that I interpreted is there had been solid direction up to that point. It was on your capital plan, talked about in the budget. You have all this move ahead, move ahead, move ahead. Whoa, wait a second, we have questions. That question and direction was to slow up, let's reevaluate. There was a debate going back and forth about, is it Inglewood? Is it Beaver Lake? Is it something else? How do we contrast, compare? What should we do? And the motion that I'm really recalling in general was to slow down and change direction. And that's what I recall is it was a 3-3 on that, failing then to take it off, but leaving some questions that Anjali was going to go back and find some answers to and come back. Not for us to go full speed ahead, continue to work on Inglewood, but to come back and revisit it. But the council is free to give us a full vetted motion and say, whoa, no, you're not hearing, let us make it clear this time. It's always better when it's very clear and the vote is
what it is so that the staff and I have the direction. Otherwise, I have to default to what direction has been given, and if it's faltering, then to sort of sort it out, say, let's go back, let's revisit it, let's make sure. And I don't have to do that. Staff doesn't have to do that if it's a clear-cut direction. Is that
right? And city manager, that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. Is
okay? Thank you.
When we leave a subject like this unanswered, then it leaves you guys kind of saying, well, what did they say and how did they say it and what did they do? So my point is, again, I'm not trying to judge, and I'm definitely not getting on your case, Mr. City Manager, at all. I'm just asking the question to the council, do we have a policy or procedure that when we have a situation like this on our in front of us, where do we leave it? And should we always leave it with a show of hands, or do we just kind of leave it? I don't know, and that's why I'm asking the question.
Well, I think it's a very good question. And in talking with the staff after some of our meetings and after the retreat on those items that come forth with a decision, we've talked about coming back and say, council, this is what we think we heard. Did we hear you correctly? And given an affirmative vote, yes or no. On this particular issue, there was a lot of dust being stirred up, a lot of questions, and we didn't leave with a clear-cut direction. So absent anything else, I have to go back and look at the record. So I hope that's helpful, trying to be.
Thank you, City Manager. And I'll just kind of leave the question out there unanswered, but it's something that we...
Okay, well, I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that that we look at funding some fields at Inglewood. I don't think we should be looking at a $10 million plan, but I think we need to put some fields at Inglewood.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second that, but before I do, we asked Anjali for data last time, and we asked her to bring data back to us so we could make a decision.
I thought so too.
And we haven't given her the chance to bring that data back. I'm not sure.
Point of order. We cannot deliberate the motion until the mayor has asked for that, please.
Yep, we have to put the motion out on the floor.
I'm not going to second that because I'm worried it's going to fail, Madam Mayor, and I think we should wait for the data to come back before we make a decision.
Well, the problem is the data won't come back.
But I support you. Well.
Oh, okay.
Mayor, members of council, let me ask Anjali again to recall. We're trying to get everything vetted out here. Anjali, what do you recall as your direction and on collecting data and kind of recount our conversation afterwards and what you thought your direction was, please?
So I'm trying to pull up my notes from last week, and it was divided, and like you said, I just didn't want to make a call based on something that was borderline to just end it last week at a study session. But we had 3 council members who wanted to delay Inglewood, and we had 2 council members who did not want to delay it. And then Deputy Mayor was a 50-50. And so that's, no?
No, I wasn't a 50-50, and I'm sitting here in the queue, and I might be able to clear the air here because what I said was that I could be convinced of the cheaper option. There was no way I was going to support the $10 million option. Now, that being said, I was looking for a little bit more data, but when I came back over on the email and emailed the council and you is trying to indicate I'm not ultimately very supportive of this because of my thoughts about Beaton Hill. We will get more community use if we can do Beaton Hill. We purchased those properties with the sole intent. I understand they've not been master planned yet. The council looked, we had a map, we looked at putting 2 fields on it. They are for the purposes of fields. That is why we acquired it. There is no way we're going to have a passive use park across from Big Rock. So I think I think the long and short of it is that we're kind of beating a horse here. We did ask for some more data to come back to council next week, but we're getting hung up on the entire work plan on a singular item. But I will say that because we have not resolved the issues, I'm not supportive of the work plan in front of us because it includes Inglewood, and I'm not supportive of moving forward and giving the blessing to a project that we have unanswered questions on at this point. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. That's kind of my sentiment there.
Okay, so if that is the feel of the majority of the council, then we might as well table the item. Does everybody feel that they can't make a decision on it because that item's on there?
You're tabling the work plan?
Well, that's the question.
No, I don't think that's why I said my comments earlier, Mayor, if I may, is that I was saying we can pass the work plan with the absence of this project. So if we want to make a motion, if you want a motion right now, I'm happy to make one. I move that we pass the 2021 work plan with the removal of Inglewood Hill Middle School projects.
Second.
Discussion?
I'll speak to my motion.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think we can, much to our city manager's point, we can come back to this next week when we have those answers. And if we want to park it right back on the work plan, then we can, or it can be permanently removed at that time if we so choose. But at least this moves us off this square and gets us moving forward.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart, did you have were you on there?
Yeah, so we're pulling all the fields off, or we're just pulling Inglewood off? Because I remember very distinctly, Councilmember Gamblin, you had a whole list of data. You had a whole table that you wanted Anjali to fill out about the kind of data we wanted to come back so we could make a decision around where we were going to get the biggest bang for our buck between Inglewood and Beaver Lake. So I'm not comfortable pulling Inglewood off. I'm comfortable saying, we should have fields on the work plan, and we wait for Anjali to come back with the data, and we make a decision on whether we're going to do Beaver Lake or Inglewood first. But Beaton Hill is years out. And, I just don't think it makes any sense to say until we can do them all, we shouldn't do any. We're going to have to take baby steps, and we're going to have to make progress. And we can't just keep kicking everything down the road. We have to make some progress here, folks. And we asked Anjali for some data, and we need to give her a minute to go get the data and bring it back to us.
Councilor Stewart, I just wanted to clarify my motion. My motion is removal of all those fields, just so it's crystal clear.
Including
and what I
Beaver Lake, everything?
No, just the Inglewood. That's it. Just the Inglewood field. That is my motion.
That's my point.
I still want to go forward with Beaver Lake.
But you asked her for some information on.
I understand that if you listen, when I spoke to my motion, what I said was that we can add it back in.
One person at a time, please.
I just don't think we need to rip this up. I think Anjali knows she has to get us some data. I don't think staff is going to go forward and build a $10 million set of fields on Inglewood without coming back to the council to get approval. And I think we need to just be reasonable and let staff have a minute to go get the data that we asked for just last week, and then we can make a decision. And I think we're getting a little wrapped around the axle on something that Anjali's going to go get us some data. She's going to come back. Councilmember Gamblin, you asked for the number of hours, on the community fields versus the ones at schools, and how much time it's going to be used by kids in school versus people outside of school, and all that kind of stuff. Why are we asking for that? I'm sorry, I'm speaking to the motion.
Point of order. Point of order.
No, the mayor needs to.
My point is, I'm getting tired and exhausted hearing Councilmember Stewart twist the motives of prior Councilmember speakers She needs to stick with the issue, talk about the issue, and quit trying to twist what others say. I'm tired of it.
Madam Mayor, may I finish, or am I done? Have I been shut down again?
Okay, I guess I wasn't listening enough to hear you twisting things, but let's try to stick to the motion. Okay,
I am absolutely.
My thing was off, so let's stick to the motion so that we're trying to not think what others are saying.
I am not trying to twist anything. I'm saying that we gave clear direction of information we wanted from Anjali, and it just doesn't seem reasonable as a council for us not to give staff an opportunity to come back to us with the answers to the questions we asked. I haven't been twisting anything that anybody said, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Ross, if I'm exhausting you, but I think this is really important. Fields is something that our community needs. Our kids need fields to play ball on. And I just don't really think that it makes any sense for us to rip something off when Anjali had clear direction. As a matter of fact, we even asked her to go look and see if there was a middle option in between the inexpensive option and the most expensive option. So she has all of that information. And Councilmember Ross, I'm not trying to twist anything, but that was something you asked for. And I don't think that any of that is an unreasonable ask. I think what's unreasonable is that we don't give staff an opportunity to answer our questions, and that we should allow them to come back with that. I think leaving these things on the work plan as fields at Inglewood, that, you know, we don't know exactly what that is yet, and we don't know which one we're going to do first. And I think we've all made that very clear. Now let's give staff a minute to answer our questions so we can make a decision about where we get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of building out fields. That's my point. I'm sorry if I've exhausted you, Councilmember Ross.
Okay, so I believe I'm next. But I would agree with you. Am I next, or is Councilmember Gamblin next? Councilmember Gamblin may be next, actually. Councilmember Gamblin.
Yeah, thank you. So in speaking to the motion, we actually are supposed to be looking as a council at what is best for the residents. Yeah, we may need fields. That's not, you know, I don't think anybody's going to argue that. But at what price point and at what budget and what makes best sense for the city fiscally when we're looking at this? So because I ask questions does not mean I particularly support it. And quite frankly, I agree with the motion of the deputy mayor that we probably shouldn't be spending a lot more time on this because budget-wise, we're not going to be there. So I would support the deputy mayor's motion on this. Thank you.
Okay, now it is my turn. And Councilmember Stewart, I completely agree with you. We didn't ask our questions of the staff until last week. They haven't had a chance to get back to us on the information we asked for. When we purchased Beaton, I did not buy it with the intent of putting ball fields on there. That may have been other people's intent. It was not mine. So apparently everybody had something different in mind. But if people did buy it with the intent of having ball fields on it, it wouldn't matter anyway, because I don't think that there is enough places in this city that we could put ball fields on and have enough that are needed. If you've looked at the recent census, you would find that we don't have enough to cover. So to say that we've got land and we've decided that we're not going to utilize it is absolutely absurd to me. So to take something off the work plan that has been given to us, that has been approved by the Parks Board, has been on there for how long? I totally agree with the fact that the $10 million plan is wrong, in my opinion. But to not do anything over there is at least equally as wrong. To remove it from the work plan with the number of kids that we have in the city, that's a huge mistake, in my opinion. And that will not have so this motion will not have my support at all. Okay, so going back up here, looking who's next. Councilmember Gamblin, you just spoke. Councilmember Ross. Okay, I guess we're going on a round 2 here. Has everybody spoken at least once? Okay, we're going on round 2. Councilmember Ross.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to be clear on my thought. I think we're trying to figure out what's the right plan for Inglewood with the data. Frankly, I think there's a different question I'm trying to answer in my mind. Should the general taxpayers of Sammamish be funding the district's capital requirements? That's the fundamental question. Number 2 is Issaquah fully funds their capital improvements for their facilities, including their fields. Number 3, Lake Washington admitted through their representative in the last meeting that not only is our lowest option above their current standard, they're asking us to invest in their capital above their standard, and that's even the $4 million option. I find it ridiculous. Plus, we get restricted use of that facility. When Councilmember Stewart and even Mayor Moran, I'm calling you out because you're calling out the motives of other council members. We need fields now. Yes, we do. But we need the right capacity, maximize our capacity, and have full control of our fields in our community. I want Beaver Lake to be state-of-the-art. Consider Beaton for that. And the complement of those 2 fields is critical to help with capacity to do it right. I don't want to be at the bequest of the district rent acting as our landlord, and at the end of 20 years, not only after 10 years, we have to reinvest in field maintenance for them, but we're going to also be at their mercy of any renewal, and they'll have the leverage then because we've already put our tenant improvement, so to speak. So I'm very, very, very concerned about us our taxpayer money to make a crutch for the Lake Washington School District. I'm sorry. They certainly shouldn't be asking for above their field standard for middle schools. And further, they have fields out there that are not even used by their students. Why are we upgrading that and we can't use it during the day? So there's so many problems with this that I'm not a supporter of investing our money or any large amounts of money in the district for their capital facilities. They need to get it in their plan to improve their fields up to their standards. And this city needs to come up with an integrated approach that maximizes facilities for our residents that they can use anytime they want, not to be under the control of the district.
And Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Frankly, Councilmember Ross took a lot of the words right out of my mouth. As I pointed out last week, the Issaquah School District improved theirs through their capital facilities plans and running bonds in their district, and they give community use to those fields. So the track that was kind of honed in on last week, the Lake Washington School District has intention of doing that anyway. They were going to pay for it if we did other improvements, but as the gentleman that they had in from the district last week pointed out, they no longer have softball, baseball, or football. And so they would not be utilizing those for those capacity, yet they would tie them up until after 5 p.m., whereas if we put them somewhere else in the city, our residents will get access to them sooner. So I want to reiterate that I still am asking for Anjali to come back with the data. What I simply said when I made this motion was that I am trying to get us off this square. And I don't think it's fair to pass a work plan with an item that is unresolved. We can resolve it next week, and council has the authority and the ability to come right back and add it back in should we decide to move forward with it. But I think it's disingenuous to pass a work plan with an item that has outstanding items saying that we're going to do it when we don't know if we're going to do it. So I'm, again, just trying to move us forward here.
Okay, then then if we don't know if we're going to be doing it this year, then, or next year, then wouldn't that be Beaton Park? Because she just said we don't know if we're going to be doing Beaton Park this year.
No, that's not what I said.
Well, you did.
No, I'm not talking about Beaton Hill. I'm talking about the Inglewood Field, which is what this item is. I'm talking about removing off Inglewood, not all of them, just Inglewood.
Because
and I'm
it's
saying
just to have something on there we're not going to work on.
We're not working on Inglewood. If this motion passes, if we can ever get to voting on it, then we will decide whether or not we're going to work on it. But next week when Anjali comes back with those answers, because she was charged with that from the council, if this council decides, okay, yes, we do want to go forward with it, we have the ability to add that back on the work plan.
Well, then we would also have the ability to take it off. And I think that the proper thing to do is to wait until they have the information to do so. And so.
But my motion is to remove it.
Yes, and it's my turn to talk. And so what I'm saying is that we have the opportunity just as much next week to listen to the information when it comes back at our next meeting, as we asked for it, to come back, listen to it, and make our decision then. And Councilmember Stewart, you're next.
I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion, which is to simply delete the description of item R7 so that the Inglewood Middle School fields is still on there, but without the description until we get the details. Because I'm concerned that by taking this off, that we're not going to put it back on. We're not going to wait for the data. We're going to move ahead without the data. So I would like to move that we amend the motion to say that we simply remove the description of item R7, but we leave R7 on the work plan.
I'd second that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Discussion?
And that will accomplish the same thing. I'll speak to my motion. There's no budget associated with this. It just allows the staff the time to come back with the data. And as Mike already pointed out, we haven't decided on the priorities yet. That will be yet another lovely discussion, I'm sure. But that way, once we have the data, we can decide on the priorities and whether we put Beaver Lake ahead of Inglewood, or we put Beaton Park, or whatever we do once we have the data.
Okay, guess not. Okay, is there anybody? There's nobody in the chat box. Oh, so we've got, yeah. Okay, we've got the city manager doing this little.
I was just raising my hand, council, and saying Horseshack wants to talk. If any of you guys remember Carter. At any rate, I'm not sure where coming back next week or coming back in 2 weeks came from. It's starting to be part of the regular conversation. So in my conversation with Anjali, I thought it was going to be at least a month. But let me ask Anjali to speak to that issue about when she and her staff were going to be able to process the data that the council asked for. Anjali, could you speak to that so the council's informed?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It is a fairly long list of questions. All we've done is regrouped. Somebody has typed them all up when we've kind of divided the responsibilities, and we're all looking into it. I'd say the earliest, if we're bringing it back at a regular meeting so there can be a vote, would be the 16th of March at the earliest, and failing which then it would be the 1st of April. Yeah, so that's my best guess at this point.
Thank you, Anjali. I just wanted the council to be cognizant of that. So whatever way you go on this vote, you know that it'll be a little bit before the information comes back, and I would urge you that we can do that. But I hate to see the work plan be held up
we can certainly take something off and suspend it like you're talking about doing. But we want to get the work plan approved to the extent possible this evening so that the other departments and Anjali has direction within some certain parameters in her department to be able to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor and nobody in the chat box. So I'm going to move on the motion on the floor.
No, you have the amendment.
The amendment on the floor. Thank you. So we have an amendment on the floor that we need to vote on. Councilmember Stewart, please repeat your amendment.
Yeah, so my amendment is that we simply delete the description of the Englewood Middle School fields so that we can leave them as a work plan item and revisit the priorities, which is already going to be a separate topic anyway.
And seeing nobody in the chat box for discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
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 It's 3-3.
Amendment fails.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so now we're back to the main motion.
Call for the question.
Councilmember Ross is in the queue.
I was going to call for questions. I second that.
Okay, would you repeat your motion?
Yep, is to remove the Englewood Middle School project from the capital projects list and pass the rest of the 2021 work plan.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Say nay. Nay.
Nay.
Motion passes. And I think with that, we're going to take a 5-minute Sammamish 5. Back in 5. It is, let's see, 1:45. We're back at 10:02. All right, so we're going to move to our next item, which is the ordinance for granting an exception. And I believe this is going to be Jeff. Is Jeff on the line?
I am, Mayor. Thank you very much.
There he is.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, and City Manager, please note that Dave Pyle is not available tonight and he's out on a much-needed family vacation. So tonight, myself, City Attorney Lisa Marshall, and Victor Salman from Transportation Solutions are here and available to answer questions. So the highlight of the ordinance that follows is this. On January 19th, 2021, the City Council adopted Ordinance 2021-525, an ordinance implementing a new transportation concurrency moratorium, which also included certain exceptions, including existing vacant single-family building lots. This ordinance took effect on January 27th, 2021. Of note, a previous city ordinance, 2020-522, stated that the new 2018, I recognize that's old, but that's how it's stated, that the 2018 building codes would take effect on February 1st, 2021. This, in effect, left 3 business days for screening, processing, and issuance of traffic concurrency certificates, followed by the applicant needing to submit the necessary requirements to submit all related building permit application materials.
for those that were interested in trying to get ahead of the change in building code for 2018 requirement. That said, we had one application on file prior to January 19th. And then between January 27th and February 1st, the city received 10 applications for concurrency certificates for a total of 11. The city staff and our consultant team worked through the weekend to process applications as fast as we could and running the concurrency model. On February 2nd, the city staff had determined that the model was up to date, sufficient, and 11 applications were approved. The challenge here is the applicants, however, are still bound by the change in code unless there's a vesting opportunity. It is possible that applicants may need to work and redo their designs. Project costs may go up, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars in new expenses, followed by an increase in construction costs to several tens of thousands of dollars as well. The new ordinance would reset the vesting for only these 11 building permit applicants to the prior 2015 codes that were put into effect under Ordinance 2016-409. It is staff's recommendation that council adopt this ordinance. Mayor, I turn it back to you for questions.
Okay, I am looking at the chat box and not seeing anything, but hang on, I'm going to put a note into the chat box. Okay, it looks like our deputy mayor has got a question.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I asked this question over email, and I recognize David Pyle is gone. I mean, I understand this, and I think, my email was kind of asking, is there any upside for the city in doing this? I was just trying to understand why, when the state is saying these are the new codes, I understand the timeline here, but I guess I didn't have an understanding if there was any benefit to the city here.
The benefit, as I see it, is to the applicants and the potential additional costs they may share or endure as a result of the change in codes. As I understand it from from the director from community development, excuse me.
Okay. I mean, I understand the premise behind these, but again, I think part of my email over the weekend was trying to better understand the agenda bill because it was lacking kind of what these codes were. So I dug that information up and sent links to council. I don't know if council looked at them, but these are all about carbon output, and the state has moved this way to try and assist. So I don't know. I feel like governing by exception is never a good thing, and we've kind of been coached along the way not to do that. So I feel uncomfortable with this. I'm willing to listen to my fellow council members, but on its face, it doesn't quite seem, I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me, I guess. But I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, I suppose. Sure.
Okay.
Mayor, do you?
I had a. Lisa, did you have input? Can you help us?
Yeah, I would just add to Jeff's remarks by indicating that it's kind of a matter of equity and a little bit of, the city, I think, in not doing this would appear to be acting quite heavily handed with the implementation of the new codes. There's a couple things that might be interesting for context. First of all, the date for implementation kept changing. And the February 1st date up until the last minute before February 1st was even in question. We thought maybe we would be delayed again until the middle of March, which means that if that were the
the go live date for these new codes. And it's more than just the energy code. It's the whole international building code, international residential code, everything's new. And so City of Seattle, as by way of example, had gained some permission to give applicants a choice so that they wouldn't be required to go back at great expense to have their plans and documents updated. As a practical matter, because the city's moratorium went into effect on January 27th, and the building codes went into effect on the 1st, then applicants holding or needing to apply for concurrency for single-family residences on vacant lots, which is an exemption in your moratorium, would have had to obtain a building permit within the 5 business day window before the new codes went into effect, through really no fault of theirs. It's just the way the window, that small little portal of temporal opportunity opened up. And in fact, I believe there was also some difficulty and challenges on the city's part in running the model. So even if we would have worked 24/7 over the weekend, those building permits could not have vested. And so due to the, spirit and intent in both the moratorium and then addressing and being mindful of just how difficult this would be and has been on applicants, the decision was made to move forward.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, can you tell me if my questions that I had were related to, I just want to double check and make sure that none of the items that were listed on the list of things that we'd be exempting were any safety items. There was nothing for, fire or anything like that. There was nothing like that. It was all, emissions and that sort of thing.
Right. 1 concurrency application for Rachel Carson and 10 single-family residences on vacant lots, totaling 11.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure we weren't dealing with safety concerns because I wanted to make sure we weren't exempting anything like that.
Right.
Okay. Council Member Stewart.
Yeah, just want to clarify. So when you say that we implemented a moratorium on January 27, wasn't that an extension of a moratorium that had been in existence since the summer and it just added exemptions?
My understanding that it was a new moratorium. And Lisa, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, the law uses both terms. For all intents and purposes, every moratorium is a new moratorium, even if you don't change a single word or period or anything.
The intent, we had been under a moratorium prior to the 27th, is my point. Yes, since the summer.
Yeah,
correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
So at least I get what you're saying. Like, they're all new, but for all intents and purposes, we have been under moratorium since, when did we implement that? In June or March or April? I don't remember now. When did we first? April? Okay. That's all I just wanted to understand. So I don't think the mayor's question was actually answered. So the codes that have changed, are any of them related to safety?
I misunderstood her question then. I thought her question was whether any of the applications were necessary for safety. The codes have all changed. The International Building Code, Residential Code, Energy Code, Plumbing Code, they've all changed. And yeah, you could argue that all of them, if not implemented, have something that tangentially, I suppose, could be argued to affect safety. But really, I think what's happening is that at each iteration of all of those codes sort of drill down a little bit more on environmental concerns, materials, other types of things. I'm not an expert in those codes, so I would have to defer to somebody else to further enumerate what's in them.
Mayor, members of council, I can comment a bit about code. The code development process takes quite a long time. I used to write stuff for the Uniform Fire Code in the state of California back, I guess, more than a few decades ago. And you often start, it takes years to get code work done. And I think in all of these codes, they work as a body. None of them you can take standing alone without having some impact on another one. That's why we just aren't singling out the 2018 Energy Code, because it could have tiebacks to then the 2018 Mechanical Code, Plumbing Code, Fire Code, Building Code, Residential Code. All of those things tend to interact, and sometimes they refer to other chapters in other codes. So that said, if you drill down into the National Fire Codes, into the National Electric Codes, the changes and subtleties there often have safety-related issues in them. So it's not a blanket that, no, there isn't any safety issues in there. The big, huge issue here that we are hearing from applicants is the significant change in the Energy Code. It was going to cost them a lot of money to change their plans, and on the construction side. When you're developing a house with your architect and contractor, it usually takes quite a while, and you develop your plans in compliance with the code that is in effect at the time, not what will be in effect 3 years from now, because the code adoption process is every 3 years in most states, and it is here. So I would think if you drill down that you would find a number of those plans that were put together were likely started before we even went into moratorium. We just thought is an issue of equity that who knows if the council wanted to give an exemption here to residential or not, but if they did, this seemed, out of fairness, something to do for a very limited number based on not just 10 people out of the air, but because of what was in the concurrency standards. Once the school was processed, and the school was processed late. Otherwise, we would have had some insight some weeks beforehand, but we didn't. That's why we were looking for a carve-out as an option to the council, just like we had done back early on in the moratorium process when we looked for an exemption to the process for those that were caught up in COVID. When we were shutting down City Hall, did they mail a check in? Did they email it? Was it a bank transfer? Were the plans brought in person? So that was sort of the genesis of how to deal with this. And we found that an ordinance adoption was a vehicle for providing that for consideration by the council.
Okay, so let's see. Councilmember Stewart, you spoke. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. I hate to continue asking questions because I think there wasn't enough in the agenda bill to kind of really understand what the code changes were. And I know I did a little bit of research and sent those. I don't know if council had a chance to read them, but I'm just trying to understand the timeline here, because what I'm reading, and I'm looking for staff to help correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is from 2018. So these codes were changed back in 2018 with a date that was to be implemented in 2021. I did find some level of indication, I guess, that the date was kind of a little bit of a moving target, but I'm looking at an August 21st, 2020 article in Better Built Northwest that says that these are going to be adopted on February 1. And considering that the city of Sammamish was under a moratorium since April of 2020, and all indications were for a renewal or a new one, whatever, I guess I'm trying to understand, why would people not be building towards the new ones knowing that we were under a moratorium?
Well, they might have.
Do we see that some builders that have applied are, or I guess I'm confused because this is back to 2018, why they weren't planning in advance.
Well, because the operable code of the 2018 wasn't going to be adopted until the year 2021. And sometimes there's delays in doing that. So I don't know. I can't get into the mind of why they didn't, but they would not have been able to get their plans processed for the 2018 code until after the adoption of that code in 2021. So for as long as it takes to put a single, I'm not thinking about a builder who's maybe got a cookie cutter that they've been using for years, but a single homeowner starts designing and planning their building, and their contractors using the code that's in effect unless they can see that there's a real short window. So,
but somebody could have been planning. I mean, since these were passed in 2018, in theory, a builder could have been planning for this implementation. It's not like you couldn't apply utilizing some of the updated code, correct? I mean, I'm trying to read on the fly here, but it's talking about you get on a point system. There's a carbon adjustment for the points total, requiring more points for electric resistance heated homes, no point adjustments for gas heated homes. Is this point system in effect here?
It is with the adoption of the 2018 code. Those are the big issues in the energy code that builders, whether single home owners, owner builder or a commercial builder, is trying to avoid, because the cost step up of doing the work plan wise and the submittals is more, and buying the appliances. And the modifications in construction is higher. But if you started doing your 2018 code, that code wasn't adopted until this month.
No, I understand that. I'm trying to understand what the code is, and that's why I'm honing in on these questions. I'm trying to understand, what is the benefit for us doing this other than just the builder? Is there some tangible benefit to the environment, to the larger community by saying no? Because I'm assuming that these codes were put in place for a reason, and I'm trying to understand what that reason is, and the agenda bill doesn't describe that, so that's why I'm kind of trying to read here. I'm trying to understand, this point system that it's talking about. So someone could have a traditional gas heated home, they just wouldn't get any points for that. I'm assuming there's got to be some overarching points total that they can't go over, or I guess I just don't understand this enough to say yes or no.
My opinion is that it's an effort. You're getting into the weeds to try to understand something that's quite complex, that you hire consultants for, even under the current codes. I've had to do this a couple times. When you want to put in a heating and air conditioning system in a commercial structure, you've got to go in, and you could have concrete brick walls that are 8 inches thick, and you still have to insulate those walls to meet the current R standards, so that you don't lose the cooling and or the heating. So you have to go through those professional reviewers and pressure test the systems. So this is just an extension of that. And if you don't have those, and it's going to cost you more points, maybe then there's other penalties. I don't know. I think that there is benefit to the environment, and that's where these code changes are coming from. And is there a benefit to those that already have their plans done? Yes. Are they going to meet those current standards? No, they wouldn't if they were, but they're being limited to 10. And we've asked the school if they're we're applying under the 2015 or the 2018 code, and we haven't got an answer back, even from their operations person, because David Pyle inquired with me and for me last week, and he didn't know. So they might have been planning for the changes in the code, but they got their concurrency done because the moratorium allowed it. So we don't know where they were. And I was trying to look at it, not how many private single individuals and how many builders. It was, here's a number 10 on top of the school that already has an exemption. If we do it, then I need to be blind to whom are the applicants. I still don't know. I haven't wanted to know. But that's the answer as far as the changes in the code. It's more environmentally friendly. That's where it's going.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I think the Deputy Mayor kind of touched on this, but I'm not sure I got a clear answer. So, Mr. City Manager, you said that they have to apply to they have to design to the current set of codes, but that's not totally true unless any of the 2018 codes, like the 2018 codes, I'm going to guess, and this is where I think the Deputy Mayor is going, are going to be more stringent. So there wouldn't be anything if they had designed to the 2018 codes that wouldn't have passed the 2015 codes. I guess that's really kind of the question I would get at, is if they designed to the 2018 codes knowing that like they were coming on February 1st and we were under a moratorium and we may or may not, you know, they may or may not have a window before that moratorium is lifted or altered, then if they had designed to the 2018 codes, they would have met the 2015 codes. Is that a true statement?
No.
No.
It's
so if they had
not.
designed to the 2018 codes, there are codes in the 2018 codes that are less stringent than the 2015 codes.
No, I didn't say that. You said if they meet the 2018 code, they met the 2015 code, and you don't get to use both codes to plan check.
I'm not.
You have to pick one.
I'm not saying that, but if I'm designing a house and it has a particular electrical standard, and there's a new electrical standard that's more stringent, if I design to the more stringent standard, that will still pass the less stringent standard.
In theory, but you're asking for black and white, and I'm not going to go there. I don't know.
Okay.
There's too many nuances in the code.
Okay. Did you have any more questions, Councilmember Stewart?
No, that's all. I was just, I mean, especially if they're mostly environmental, then I'm going to guess, and I know it's not, you know, but I'm going to make a really educated guess that the codes are more stringent and more environmentally friendly, which means if they had designed to the 2018 code, they would have met the 2015, they would have passed the 2015 standards.
Okay, so my question comes into do you have an educated guess or any kind of guess of what is the cost of the added cost of these code changes? Do you have any idea?
Jeff, David might have discussed that with you.
Yeah.
I could give a ballpark, but maybe you've got more
my thought is
particulars.
this isn't something the builder's going to pick up. This is something that's going to get added to the cost of the housing.
The anecdotal information that David shared with me was tens of thousands of dollars, depending upon the size and complexity of the individual applicant. Just changing the materials out, the redesign work, those kinds of things would be in the neighborhood of, you know, several tens of thousands of dollars. But I don't have a specific number. I have that general range as shared to me by David Pyle.
Councilmember Ross?
Yeah, I have a question, but I think it's probably more appropriate in my judgment for executive session, so I'm not going to ask it. In light of that, I can't make a decision without further drill down and understanding of the issue.
Mayor, it may be the benefit of a 15-minute executive session. I could think of one right now for Lisa, but can't discuss it.
Okay. Council members, do you want to go into executive session for 15 minutes on this? Okay. So, Lisa, can you give us a number? You're on mute.
RCW 4230 110 1 sub I.
Okay. And we will be back in, well, we say 15, so let's say 20 minutes.
Mayor, some of us will need the access GoToMeeting link for executive session. If Mike could provide by email real quick.
Okay, he's on it right now.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see everybody else on the other side. Okay, council, the first thing we need to do is we need to do a motion to extend.
Move to extend to 11 p.m.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Okay, that would be 5-1. Okay, then I need to remind everybody of our time. It's 10 o'clock. We need to finish this. We need to go back up and hit the priorities back on the work plan. And we still need to talk about small business recovery. And we have to do all that within an hour. So I'm going to keep everybody to task because I don't want to go past 11. So coming out of executive session, do I have a direction from the council? Okay, do we want to?
We can't make a motion. We can't make a motion in a negative, correct?
Right.
So because we can't make a motion in the negative, I would ask that we take this item and then table it.
Okay, so is that a motion? You want to table it and table
I'll make a motion that we table it in 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's to be tabled to the meeting on the 2nd? I believe that's right.
You need a second in discussion.
Need a second.
Second.
Okay, so we have a first and we have a second. Yes, I was aware we needed a second, but thank you. Okay, we have a first, now we have a second. Any discussion on that? Okay.
I'm in the queue. I'm in the queue.
Yes, I see you there. I just picked that up. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. I'm not supportive of tabling this, so I think we just move on the agenda.
So the idea then, Christy, would be that you would just move forward?
Yes, if we don't vote on it and we don't table it, then it doesn't come back. If we table it, it comes back and we'll talk about it again. I'm not interested in talking about it again, so.
I'll withdraw my tabling and ask that we move on in the agenda. If that's all right with you, Ken Gamblin.
Of course.
Okay, so you want to just move on the agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, then going on the agenda, what we need to do is we need to go back and we need to hit priorities that were on the unfinished part of the work plan. And Mr. Sugg, can you help us out with that?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mayor. Mike Sugg, Senior Management Analyst. I can't turn on my webcam anymore because my laptop died, so I apologize for that. So this is the second part of that agenda item that we were talking about before the most recent one, and it is on the City Council's priorities. So you'll recall at the City Council retreat, we had a preliminary discussion about which of the work plan items Council felt were a priority in 2021. That information, plus some additional feedback received post-retreat, is summarized here, and let me pull it up on the screen for everybody. In one moment. There we go. These are still very preliminary, as I know some members are still considering their priorities, and we've also only shown the non-capital projects here for simplicity tonight. Basically, these are the items on your screen that were included on 3 or more council members' feedback that we received. So essentially, 3 or more council members mentioned that this was one of their top 10 priorities. And it includes a lot of the obvious projects here. We have the small business and nonprofit COVID grants, the phase 2 development regs, the EIS, the stormwater code amendments, comp plan and development regs, mid-buy budget, ADA transition plan, and the town center regional stormwater plan. There were a number of others mentioned, but they had less than 3, or they were on less than 3 council members' lists. And basically just wanted to take this chance. It didn't sound to me over receiving the feedback that we were quite ready to finalize this yet, but wanted to check in to see what other information we could provide or answer any questions, and then maybe we could come back at a future meeting once we've had a chance to further consider that. So with that brief intro, I will turn it back to the mayor for any discussion.
Okay, it looks like we have a couple of questions coming in from Councilmember Gamblin.
I think the deputy mayor was first.
I have her for the last.
That was in the last topic.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have her for the last one.
Okay, sorry. So I'm wondering if someone can explain T1 to me. What does mobility EIS mean? And what does balanced land use mean?
Jeff, could you speak to this maybe?
Sure. This is dealing with the EIS work that we're doing related to the V over C project that we're currently working on. The renaming was an attempt to, I guess, further identify what it is that we were looking to do with the alternatives related to evaluating the V over C. We were trying to take a balanced land use approach and addressing mobility in the EIS.
Okay, but not, addressing mobility in the EIS doesn't tell me what mobility is relating to. What do we mean by mobility?
Predominantly that's our, the evaluation of the traffic model and where cars are going in the network to understand, depending upon the land use that we are evaluating in those alternatives, where the vehicles are predominantly going. It's primarily looking at that piece of the mobility.
Okay, you got it. Well, thank you.
Okay, oops. Next up, I have got Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, the only thing I would, Mike, that I'm curious about is why EX is on here ahead of E8 and E9, or is EX on there? The question is, it seemed to me that the smartest thing for us to do as a council would be to first move on E8, then spend the money to do the research on E9, which would give us the data, which would allow us to do EX. Is that still the way we're looking at it? And if so, then we would need to change the priority.
Yeah, so this is simply...
Even though Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say is this is simply a tally, essentially, of what council members submitted in their feedback. So there may be a more targeted approach you would want to take when developing a list of priorities.
Thank you, Mike.
And can I add that our intention from the public works side is that we, just as you said, Councilmember Treen, is that we would do E8, E9, and then EX. That is the order that we're going to be bringing back before you in the near future, with consultant support, staff plan, and the ramifications of doing those three things.
Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor? Oops, sorry. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Gamblin's question. Jeff, when you talked about mobility, you basically said depending on the land use, we're going to look at how that impacts where the cars go, I think is kind of what you said. When we talk about mobility, are there mobility alternatives in there that look at, like, well, what if we did what if we paid for transit? What if we had a shuttle down to the light rail station? What if we had additional, connections for more bike and pedestrian ways? Or is it just about if we change land use to A, then cars go here?
The primary focus of the EIS is evaluating the V over C standard and how land use and mobility, in this case, predominantly cars, are interwoven and affected by that. And those are the primary alternatives that we're focused in at this point in time in the EIS.
Okay. I think that kind of answers my question. So it's not really looking at it holistically. It's just looking at, if I change A and nothing else, then this is what it looks like. And it's not really looking at, like, if we have more people living in, for example, apartments or townhomes clustered together, then we could make transit work better and we could have a shuttle, and that would have a different impact on mobility.
Lisa, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think the best way to summarize this item is that the EIS is still in process. We've done our scoping on the EIS. That was a public process. And we have not gotten to the point to issue a preliminary draft EIS. That's the next milestone. And so I'm uncomfortable going into a great amount of detail in a meeting about the 4 different alternatives that we're examining and what each one of them includes. To answer your question, as far as I can, Councilmember Stewart, is that the land use component with the transportation component does take into account housing to a certain degree, but I'm uncomfortable going into any more detail than that in this meeting.
Okay, and when you say it was a public process, my understanding is we did get feedback, but we didn't have to listen to any of that feedback. So, like, we had a majority of the comments asking for a particular alternative to be looked at, but that alternative was not actually put in as one of the alternate options to review. Isn't that correct?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to, that's an impossible question for me to answer on the spot, Pam. I don't know what you mean by people asked us to put things in and we didn't listen to them. I don't think I can agree with.
We had this discussion before. There were a majority of the comments asked for additional housing balance, and that was not one of the alternatives that was listed as in scope, was the balanced housing approach. So I just want to clarify, when you say it was a public process, I guess I can ask this question. You made a comment in a previous public meeting that the comments that we received on the scoping, we were not legally required to respond to those. We will only be legally required to respond to the comments that come in the future, but not the ones that we got for asking for input on the scope. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't recall making that statement. We followed RCW 4321C with respect to the EIS scoping, and we followed the process as we are legally required to.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Deputy Mayor?
Thanks. I guess I'm just trying to understand from staff, like, these are these other draft priorities. Are we looking to kind of order these, or they're already ordered? What is the ask from staff here exactly?
So from my perspective, I don't think the priorities necessarily need to be ordered. I think it's just a list of projects that the council feels strongly about and would like to see accomplished this year, and that there's kind of general consensus on the group. What we did in 2018, the last time we had a list of priorities, I wish I had the graphic handy right now, but essentially we broke down, I think Councilmember Ross mentioned it earlier in the meeting, you kind of had some core tenets of the priorities, such as financial sustainability and high-performing government, and then around it you had priority projects in each area. So in environment, you listed a few projects. In transportation, you listed a couple projects. And it wasn't necessarily, we want to do this one first, or this is our highest priority, but as kind of a group, these are the projects we feel, most strongly about and absolutely need to get done this year. So I guess the conversation tonight is, is this list, this draft list kind of a good start, or is there additional information or discussion? Oh, I think Dave has something to add.
And I think too, Council, if I could add on to that, we've listed to the Council, we've gotten feedback, and we're sharing back with you what the concurrence of the council body was. So we're bringing it back for sort of a reconfirmation and a resharing with you what items got the top three. And in doing that, then in this dynamic, are we on track? So we can move forward.
Okay, so do you need a motion from us then to solidify this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Mr. Quick on the mic.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? We can finish up with the rest of the comments that were in the chat box.
So the motion is that we adopt this order. I wasn't sure what so moved meant. Sorry. Can you just clarify that?
Sure. I'm moving these draft priorities. That's one of the questions that I asked of Mike Sugg was, are these ordered in any particular order? They're not. At least that's what I heard. So this is just kind of the overarching look at what, those priorities will be. Hopefully I phrased that correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Call for the question.
Okay, then. So does anybody have any comments? Okay. So all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? You got the only thing that came across as a 6-0 tonight. Good job. Okay, so the last thing that is on the agenda for this evening is the small business recovery grants. And that is Mr. Sugg.
Great, thank you, and good evening once again. Mike Suggs, Senior Management Analyst, joined on the line by Christina Morgan, who is a contractor helping out with the business grant programs. And tonight we are here for the initial discussion on the third round of the business grant program. You will recall that round 2 was approved by council on December 15th, and at that time there was a desire to consider a third round. So the council assigned the same subcommittee as the last 2 rounds, which included Deputy Mayor Malchow and council members Ross and Stewart, to review the program and come back to council for a full council discussion in early 2021. The committee has met 3 times so far this year to consider possible changes to the grant program. And tonight we will quickly talk through some of those proposed changes, which are included in the agenda bill, and we'll allow some time for discussion. If following discussion the council feels ready to move forward, we do have a proposed schedule in the agenda bill. If this item needs a bit more review and discussion, that schedule can easily be pushed back. So let me go ahead and pull up I have 3 quick slides here. Okay. So you should see a slide called application, and one of the main topics that was discussed by the committee was making sure that the third round was a bit more focused than the first and second rounds. And unlike the first 2 rounds, there will be a limited budget this time. And the sense was that we really needed to concentrate the limited funding on businesses most impacted by COVID-19. And that includes those businesses supporting employees and those providing in-person services primarily. So with that in mind, the committee reviewed the criteria of the previous rounds and looked for opportunities to better target those impacted businesses. On this screen, we have the minimum eligibility criteria with the proposed new criteria in bold. And essentially what this means, these minimum eligibility criteria are basically the list of things that a business would have to meet in order to be able to apply and be eligible for a grant. Some of the key changes to this list include, the first is requiring that the business employ at least 3 FTEs. And this FTE limit ensures that the dollars are being directed to businesses that have more limited resources, but have also created jobs that support the community as well as kind of stabilize and grow the economic base. So you'll see that 3 is bolded because that is a proposed new change. The top end of that employee limit range, the 25, is unchanged from the last round. Another change in bold is requiring that the business be open to the public as allowed under the governor's orders. Under the current phase of the Healthy Washington Plan, my understanding is that all businesses may be open to the public, although many are limited to 25% capacity currently. And what this criteria does is ensures that we're funding viable businesses that are continuing to provide services through these difficult times. The next one there is requiring that the business rely on regular in-person contact to generate revenue. And this is because the businesses that rely on in-person services are generally the most impacted by the governor's closures and capacity limits. And they will continue to experience depressed business activity until the vaccine is widely available. These include businesses such as restaurants, personal services, childcare, things like that, where virtual work is not an option. They have to have that in-person contact. The last kind of significant change here in bold is the committee's proposing setting an annual revenue range of between $50,000 and $1.5 million in 2019. And again, this is kind of zeroing in on those most in need. At the low end, the $50,000 limit focuses on businesses where it is the primary source of their income. So no, it's not a side business. It's a full-time thing. At the high end of the range, it kind of focuses in on businesses where the grant will still be meaningful. So that was kind of part of the reason why the committee has considered that annual revenue range. So like I said, this slide shows how we kind of narrow down those applications that come in the door to concentrate those most in need. And the next slide, we'll look at how we review those applications that do come in. And again, just this is a 3-slide PowerPoint, so we'll move quickly. So the next phase after application is review. And during the first 2 rounds, we asked applicants to list their COVID-related expenses in the application. So they said, here's how much we've spent on PPE or payroll or rent. And then assuming they met all of those other criteria that we laid out, we would then fund them for those expenses that they incurred up to the maximum grant award. And of course, those expenses were verified before payment. This round, we were looking at doing something a little bit different. There was discussion of utilizing a council committee with staff support to review applications and make a needs-based determination on grant allocation. And this allows for a bit more of a tailored approach where businesses are funded, based on their true need. And to assist in the review of the applications, the committee would use some general scoring criteria to help prioritize the applications. And then a grant recommendation would be developed based on that scoring, as well as the amount of eligible expenditures the business had and the impact the grant support would have on that business. Of course, the committee would also have to take into account and make it fit within the total program budget, which is to be determined. And so this slide just shows some of the factors that the committee would look at when they're reviewing the applications, and then kind of how that translates into developing a recommendation. The last slide here is distribution, and the grant amounts that are determined on that last slide would be used to reimburse for expenses incurred due to COVID between March 2020 and February of this year, this month. It would be limited to rent, mortgage, utilities for the business location, employee payroll, no owner draw this time, and then PPE and space improvements needed due to COVID. And then before the grant funding would be released, the grantee would provide actual 2020 revenues and expenses. This is because the application will be open before taxes are due, and this follow-up will serve to verify the estimates that the applicant submits in the application. And then they would also submit a signed agreement in W-9, as well as any receipts or documentation for the expenses claimed. So that's all I have for the 3 slides there. One thing we didn't touch on was the total budget for the 3rd round. As Andrew mentioned earlier in the meeting, their staff are planning to come to council in a couple weeks with a contract for the vaccination site that may require up to $500,000 be earmarked for that purpose. Although that will likely be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. I understand there will likely be other governmental costs, such as staff being on emergency leave, and then you may want to consider further nonprofit grants going forward. So there's a lot of different factors that are going into that remaining CARES Act allocation, this being one of them. And so with that in mind, you might look at the council might look at a range of somewhere in the range of $300,000 to $400,000 for this 3rd round of business grants. And with that on top of the existing $1.2 million allocation that we've made over the 1st and 2nd rounds, would result in us spending about half of the total $2.9 million we received in CARES Act on business grants, if we were to put that $300,000 to $400,000 on top of that. So with all that said, I know it was a lot. I will wrap up my presentation there and turn it over to the mayor, or potentially any other members of the committee that would like to weigh in.
Okay, it looks like we have questions. Councilmember Treen.
I don't have a question at this time, actually. I think we should move forward with it. I just really have a statement. Thanks.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, hey, Mike. It struck me tonight when the emergency manager was kind of going over how much we've spent of the CARES Act dollars, and he quoted we've allocated $1.2 million towards small business grants, and was it $500,000 or $700,000 to human services? I don't know if you know that off the top of your head. I apologize for putting you on the spot there, but.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. It was, I believe, rounded up to $525,000 for the nonprofit grants so far.
Okay. So it struck me that, have we ever looked into sort of, and this may not be an apples for apples kind of comparison, but how much are we directly helping people through the human services grants versus how much we're helping people through the small business grants? Obviously, everybody needs help, but we can't help everybody. And so really, again, trying to make the assessment of, are we helping more people in a bigger way through human services, or are we helping more people in a bigger way through more small business grants? Because we've already allocated more than twice as much in small business grants than we have to human services. And given that we may have limited dollars left, I'm just trying to understand where we will do the most good for the most people in terms of how we allocate the rest of that money. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Unfortunately, I don't have anything with me that would, data or metrics that would speak to, I guess, the relative value of more money towards businesses or nonprofits.
Right. So I feel like we should maybe answer that question. And probably, as much as I want to help the small businesses for sure, I feel like we should get an answer to that question. And maybe we should also understand how much we may have to spend on the vaccine program before we make any final decisions here. Those are kind of my thoughts. Thanks.
Mayor, on the issue that Councilmember Stewart brings up, how much on the vaccination, the current discussion right now is that the city of Issaquah and the city of Sammamish are drafting up an agreement, and what we have right now is just south of $500,000 each should we not get reimbursed from FEMA. And the FEMA reimbursement is not cut and dry. We need to qualify, and Andrew Stevens has shared a little bit of his knowledge with Issaquah and with Sammamish on that. And we would have to spend the money before we can get reimbursed for it. And we're in discussions right now with EFR. And we were just emailing late today about how to draft up that contract so that we can be as effective as possible. And it's looking like the two agencies need to be the lead on this issue and not Eastside Fire and Rescue, but Eastside Fire and Rescue would be contracting with the two cities. At any rate, that said, we'll be coming to you probably on March 2nd with a contract between the two cities and about moving forward. And the number is somewhere in the high 400s, but so that's why I say south of $500,000 each that we will likely have to spend and then seek reimbursement. It's just an FYI right now. We'll know more in the next week.
Great. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. That's helpful.
Yes. So go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to note about, and I didn't catch if Mr. Stevens mentioned it earlier this evening, but with all of the expenses taken into account, including the most recent nonprofit grant allocation of about $210,000, by our calculations, we have about $750,000 remaining of the CARES Act allocation.
Okay, then my comment is, and I wanted to reiterate, I guess, what Councilmember Stewart said was, I don't think we're ready to move on this tonight. For two reasons. One is, I think we need to know where we're at with the funding for the vaccination program. And the second one is, I think we need to know a little bit, everything that I'm seeing coming out of, and we talked about it today, a little bit on the phone call we were on, but also everything that I'm hearing on every phone call I'm on these days is rent reimbursement. And so we've done a lot to help our small businesses, but we've just sent out we've literally just sent out the checks for the last round. And so I don't feel like we're in an immediate hurry to do something right today. But I do feel like we need to get a handle on, what we're going to have to do for rent reimbursement stuff yet. And I have concerns for that for the remainder of the year. And so I want to make sure that we're a little bit more in tune of what our needs may be for that. Those are my thoughts. Okay, anybody else have any questions? Okay. Okay, so I'm not hearing any motions to do. Oh, here we go. We've got Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry, I was struggling to get the mute button off. I guess I'm kind of concerned, though. I mean, the committee spent, considerable time on this, and if we just got the checks out from the last round, I guess I'm concerned that we're not going to move forward on this yet, because it just means that the checks that we cut for the third round will be kind of far out. So I guess to that end, a little uncomfortable in waiting. So I guess I will just put it out there. I'll make a motion that we move forward with this round 3 of grant funding for businesses.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion? Oh, okay, let's see. We've got some discussion here in the chat box. So, Councilmember Gamblin?
So, Deputy Mayor, can we have a delineation on what moving forward entails? What does it mean?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up Mike had it up on the screen, and I can't. My agenda packet doesn't work, so I can't pull it up. It's basically the parameters to which the committee put forth that we would be using that criteria. If Mike, I don't know if you have the ability to put it back up just so that the council can see it.
Sure.
But that's moving. Okay. That was the basis of my motion, was the criteria that which we established for round 3 of grant funding, so that basically we would be charging staff with going out and letting people know that we were going out, there you go, for another round of grant funding, so that they could begin to apply, because if it's, a month or 2 or longer from the time that we open that up, by the time they have the checks in their hands. That was just my concern, was in waiting too much longer.
Okay, so your motion is that we continue on with the process of the next step would be notification of the public that this is available?
Yes. My motion is basically that what you see here, which was the criteria that the committee had worked on, that we put this forth as our third round of business grants.
Okay. Could I have an amendment then that the staff notifies at the same time that the Timing and amount is totally unknown. I mean, I guess it's always unknown, but here it seems to be particularly unknown.
Yeah, I think, and we had discussed that as a side note as a committee, is that there was a little bit of an unknown here on funding because we have eyes wide open that there's vaccine needs coming, down the pike probably, and there may be unforeseen things as well. So, but at least if we have applications in hand, we'll have a better understanding of the need that's out in our community, and we can execute decisions based on that information. So I'll second your amendment that that's a part of it if need be.
Thank you.
So you have an amendment and a second to the amendment, which is to move forward on the timetable that was listed in the packet.
Yep. So I guess we won't wait for 2 weeks for the vaccination stuff. So we're going to move to the timetable of you can.
Well, I'm just asking a question here.
Yeah, I'm listening to two people here. Just a second.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure we reiterated that the balance of money that we have is $750,000, and to do the vaccination program, we'll need just under $500,000. Now that could come out of your regular unappropriated reserves. We've just been working with the unappropriated reserves derived from CARES. So just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Mr. City Manager, just a quick clarification question on that $500,000. Didn't we hear from Andrew Stevens, I think a week ago or so, we had found out that will be 100% reimbursable by the federal government?
No, we don't.
Yes, but you have to qualify. We have to make sure that the contract is going to succeed, and you won't know that until after you've spent the money. And there's a high probability, but we've just realized today that one of the plans of moving forward of having EFR be the tip of the spear may not work, and it may be rejected because of what their position is. But if we contract with them, it appears that we might be more successful. We're still looking at all of this. It's still got moving parts, and we will bring a contract to the council for March 2nd.
Okay, understood. So I think to Councilmember Gamblin's amendment, it does state that the city is at this time unaware of what the total grant program will be. And I think that's in part because we don't know what's going on with the vaccine program, which, I put heavy stock in as being incredibly important. So I think by getting a jump on the program and putting it out, we're not going to have applications in hand. We'll have all that stuff by the time we have a better understanding of the vaccination program. We're not handing out the money before we have that info in hand. I think we're just trying to get ourselves a little bit of a head start.
Right, and the reimbursement from FEMA can be upwards of a year. So just know that you've got to spend the money, then you go through the process, whatever that timetable is that FEMA decides. The good news is they'll pay up to 100% if everything qualifies, but it could be several months before we see the money after the expenditure. Just knowing what the cash flow is.
And I think this says potential grant program timeline, which builds in some potential that those dates get kicked out a little bit further if we need them to be. But at least we'll have the applications in hand and know what the community need is.
Okay, so who is after Councilmember Gamblin, I believe it is? Was Councilmember Gamblin, were you done?
No, I've had my questions answered. Thank you.
Councilmember Ross?
So to be clear, the I'm not sure it's an amendment or a clarification of the original motion, but what I'm hearing is we're being asked to approve the structure, a recommendation of the third round, which is essentially outlined in the slides, and then pending budget will be determined later when we review all those sources and needs. So we're not going to approve any budget tonight for it. That'll be a different time. And I think I heard just now from Deputy Mayor's comments that we want to include a quote with the emphasis on potential grant timeline to give a preliminary communication of schedule. Did I capture all that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, so I'm in favor of all that. So however we vote through these motions/amendments, however we get there, I'm supportive.
Councilmember Stewart?
Oh, did you want to go first, Madam Mayor? You were in the queue ahead of me there.
Oh, I do. Well, again, I'm going to once again caution about moving quickly without having information. If we wait a couple of weeks, we can fill in some of the blanks. And I don't know exactly why we're in such a hurry, but we wait 2 weeks, we can fill in some of the, I'm concerned about where we are with, if we take away the money out that we would do for the vaccines. And I just mentioned the rent is being a huge issue for people this year. And then we look at what would be left for businesses. And then we need to look also at the money that would be left for human services. And I just think we have a picture as a whole that we need to look at. And I understand and I respect the work that the committee's done, but we're coming down to the very end here, and I just think we need to look at it as a whole. That's my 2 cents worth. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. We seem to be agreeing a lot this evening. I don't know if we need to go out and buy a lottery ticket or something, but I fundamentally don't have a problem with kind of moving forward. The 2 questions I have. One is, how much will we spend in terms of, I know we have a consultant helping us with this, if we move forward now versus if we wait 2 weeks? Because I share your concern, Mayor, that we are starting to get down to a smaller sum of money, and until we allow Mike and probably Rita to kind of come back to us with where does it potentially make more sense for us to spend the money on, human services, grants to help with, rent, and even possibly some mortgage assistance, right? So people who have been out of work for a long time, when these moratoria on rent and mortgage, like the evictions and the foreclosures lift, people may have some pretty big needs. And those, the money we have may be able to help those people in much bigger ways than the amount of money we have to give out to the small businesses. And I think the point you raised earlier, Mayor, about if we're just getting the checks out from the previous round, businesses may or may not have their next set of needs completely understood. So I don't have a problem with potentially kind of getting things moving, but if we wait 2 weeks and we have more of that information, can we save some of our expenditures of starting to administer a program that we may decide we either won't administer like this, or we may want to make some tweaks to? That would be my bigger concern, is if we find out that maybe we have a smaller pool of money than we originally thought, will we tweak some of the criteria again? I don't know. And I was part of the committee, and I do think we did some good work. I think we put a considerable amount of time in. But in an ever-changing situation, if we think we might need to tweak it again, I don't want to rush this out to the public and then have people start to apply, and then we realize that maybe we wanted to change the criteria. So that would be my hesitation in moving forward today, as opposed to waiting 2 weeks until we have some more of that data.
Okay, Councilmember Gamblin?
Yeah, I'm set. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, is there anybody who has any more comments? Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor. And who was it that made the amendment?
I did.
Okay,
Karen.
so I'm going to ask you to repeat your amendment.
Amendment is to make sure that there is notification that the amount and the timing of any future grants is unknown at this point.
Okay, so all those in favor of the amendment on the floor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so 5-1. Oh, question?
As far as the review committee goes, once the applications do come in, would it make sense to assign those members now? Do we want it to be the same as the subcommittee that initially put this program together, or do we want to wait on the grant review committee?
Mr. City Manager?
So this third round process is proposed to utilize a review committee, a council committee to review applications with staff. And I was just wondering if we wanted to appoint those members right now, or
I think we need to do it tonight, but I think it should be maybe one or two from the committee and somebody else. It should be a mix, but we certainly don't.
Well, we have to still vote on the motion.
Yes.
What if the motion fails and we're not doing a committee?
That's true.
my apologies, got a little ahead of myself.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Now we are on to the original motion. And who made the original motion?
Deputy Mayor.
Would you please repeat your motion?
My motion was to move forward with the grant program as outlined in the slide by the committee.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Main motion as amended, though, yeah?
Yep. Yes, sorry. Okay, all those in favor, you might want to do a roll call on that.
Mayor Moran,
Nay.
Deputy Mayor Malchow,
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ross,
Aye.
Councilmember Stewart,
Nay.
Councilmember Treen.
Nay.
Okay, it's 3-3. So,
excuse us.
I would like to
we
move
wanna
that
make-
we bring this back.
Oh, I'm just
we've got another.
City Manager.
asking the staff and the clerk to make sure that we understand what just failed.
The main motion as amended failed.
Okay. All right.
The amendment passed, strangely, but yeah, the main motion failed. So we're at square one. We have nothing at this point until there's another motion.
Okay.
So I don't know if we need a motion, but I was going to propose that we add this back to the agenda on March the 2nd, or I should say at a later date once we have the additional information from the vaccine program, as well as the analysis from Mike and Rita on small business grants versus human services needs.
Can we put a
Relief.
Can we put a not to be later than date on that?
I would look to the city manager to let us know when that makes sense. I don't want to time box them in. I want them to be able to get the information that we need. So I trust that he will bring that back at the earliest possible date once they have the information, once they have time to do that. Is that fair, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, I'll do that. And at the same time, since I have the mic on that, I'm going to have Andrew Stevens resend to the entire council the results of the survey that he reported on just a couple of weeks ago, to the benefit of what came out of that survey. It would remind us all to help you with some of your priorities. So we'll get that sent out, and then when we know more about the contract and that such, we'll bring this back.
And Mr. City Manager, is it okay, Mayor, if I ask a clarifying question there?
Sure.
Yeah, so I appreciate you resending that survey, but will Mike and Rita also have an opportunity to get some more information, to the mayor's point, on what the anticipation is on people who are going to need rental assistance and possibly even mortgage assistance as we look ahead at when those moratoria will be lifted? Because I do think that's a real concern.
Yes,
I'm going to have Mike address that.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, Rita and I will reach out to our rental assistance providers and kind of get a lay of the land and report back to you as soon as we can.
Okay, thanks, guys. And I think it is beyond just the rental assistance, but that is a big one. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is the council reports and city manager report.
No special report tonight, thank you. Oh, okay, the mayor's reminding me I should report on the governor's call, but I didn't want to steal her thunder. We had a call today, I forget the gentleman's name, out of the governor's office, and Issaquah staff and Sammamish staff are on the call, as well as Andrew Stevens, about the accessibility for vaccinations. And we just got reconfirmation about the very limited supply, how the governor is allocating it, that the best thing we could do is what we are doing is advocating for a supply through the county health officer, as we are doing through the county executive with the letter. And he was optimistic that more vaccinations were coming, but I'm not sure that he was really tied into any other more optimal information or streams of information than what we might pay attention to, watching closely the major news sources. But we did make contact. It was a very successful call. He invited us to do that again if we had questions. And was there any other particulars out of that, Mayor? Then we had Mayor Moran on the call and Mayor Pauley on the call. Wally was on the call, or the city administrator from Issaquah, myself, and some of our PR staff, Andrew Stevens, and then a couple other folks. Yes, Leah can help me with that. Yeah, the idea of frustrations that all communities were having, getting shots to the elderly community who weren't in a program like Medicaid. There are a lot of folks out there who are 75 and 85 or 95 who aren't on Medicaid, who need the vaccinations, but seem to be sort of shut out from access. And he was getting, the governor's office was getting a lot of complaints about that. And there's a strong effort to facilitate that. And one of the things he tried to assure us of is that until a certain group of individuals reaches a 50%
let's say, effective rate for that band of people, they're not going to move on to the next group. And as I'm struggling with this, Andrew, if you're still on the line, you can pop on here and help me with that so that the entire message is conveyed. So, for example, we've got the 75-year and older who are Medicaid, who some of those being helped by the mobile units, other ones that are being identified, but trying to get the other elderly who have not been included would most likely happen before they lowered the ages, say, down to 65 or down to 55. And the numbers we were talking about, being able to get to very high numbers for the lower age population could be well into the summer. So I don't know if Andrew is still on the call tonight, but is he? No, okay. But I think that pretty much covers it then.
Yeah, and then talked about the vaccine rollout and that, you know, people are talking about how there's supposed to be, you know, 100 million of one of these vaccine that's supposed to be coming out, but that 100 million's actually what they forget to say is that means between now and the end of June. And so, you know, you've got, when you hear all that information, just kind of take it all with a little bit of a grain of salt because, you know, we only get a certain amount, and to kind of remind everybody to look at the amount that the U.S. is getting compared to the rest of the world. And then also look at that, you know, take how much, you know, the state of Washington gets compared to the rest of the United States. And so, you know, as you have to, you know, actually, you know, take it down little by little by little, you'll start to understand a little bit more. But yeah, they're trying to get to the elderly in particular that are through programs like Eastside Friends of Seniors and stuff like that, that are, you know, that are in their homes, have been in their homes, are isolated, that they're just trying to get to because it, you know, the factors are in place that it's not good for them to come out. So they're trying to make sure they get all of those, and they're also realizing that the fact is that when all is said and done, we may never get more than 70% of the population, which was surprising to me. I hadn't realized that.
Yes, he made a point, Council, of saying that up to an average of 30% of health workers were rejecting inoculation. And so we may never get greater than 70% of the population. So a big question, not to be answered today, but he said in the future, what are we going to do about that 30% of the population that is not inoculated and doesn't want to be? It was a very sobering moment as we listened to
Andrew is back on here.
Okay.
Okay, Andrew.
Mayor, we need to extend. It's 11 a.m. and we have an executive session still, so I move we extend to 11:30.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Ooh, we're up to 2. Okay, 4-2. All right, so Andrew, you're on the line.
Yes, Mayor. I just wanted to let you know if there's any additional questions, I can provide any additional insight to what the city manager was referring to about this morning's call. I'm happy to take those questions.
Yeah, it was basically the 30% of the population that in the end will not be vaccinated, which seemed, so that was the first time I had heard that percentage, so that was surprising to me.
Yeah, there has been some people, I think, that are hesitant. It's a vaccine hesitancy. I think the public health officials are expecting that number to decrease. You're seeing some of the early hesitancy from the speed of the vaccinations and how quickly they're completed. As more and more of the populations are being inoculated, and you're seeing far fewer, I guess, vaccine injuries or reactions. I believe that number will go up They did mention, as the city manager said, that they did reduce that threshold from 70% population being vaccinated before they would move on to that additional category down to 50%. I think that's to combat some of that hesitancy. But I also think they were very conscious of the fact that the sudden change from phase 1B1 from 75 and over to 65 and over, and how many additional, I think what burden that placed on the populations in the phase A categories that had not yet been vaccinated, that caused a great strain, and I think that's what you're seeing right now. Obviously, those that are 65 and over have resulted in 90% of the fatalities in the state, so it is highly important. But I think they understand the need to prioritize some of those more vulnerable populations first. I think, Mayor, you mentioned, a 90-year-old versus a 65-year-old is a far greater risk.
Okay, and it looks like Councilmember Stewart had a question for you.
I just wanted to provide some additional context on the number of doses that we have. So I know it's been in the news a lot. One of the interesting data points that I wasn't aware of before is that the number of doses being delivered to each state is dependent on the number of adults in the state. So, like, we are 38 in terms of the number of doses delivered per 100,000 residents. I think in part because we have a lot of families in Washington. So, like, the state that has the highest number of doses per 100,000 is actually Alaska. So it's just something to keep in mind that, I know people are frustrated, but I think we're up to in the high 70s or low 80s. I think it was 81% last I checked in terms of the number of doses administered compared to how many we've actually gotten. So I think we're doing, as a state, I think we're doing a pretty good job of getting the vaccines in people's arms once we get the doses. But they are, unfortunately, in limited supply.
That's a very good point. Okay, any other questions for Andrew Stevens while he's still on the line with us? Okay, thanks for coming back, Andrew.
No worries, thank you.
Okay, and with that, does anybody have any other comments, any council members that need to do council reports?
I did want to give an update that I have not received any updated countywide planning policies. So what you see in Deputy Mayor Malchow's report that was delivered to the PIC, which is from the version from January 27th, that's the latest I have. They had said that they would get us an updated version, but I haven't seen anything updated. So just wanted to let you guys know. I haven't seen it to share it.
Okay, with that, we will be going into executive session for until 11:30 to review the performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1G and tentative potential land acquisition.
It's Parks has something for you for the council to look at.
Okay, and tentative potential land acquisition pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1B), and okay. And Council, I'll see you on the other side. Okay, again, this is Tuesday, February 16th, 2021. We will be extending to midnight. Again, we will be extending our executive session till midnight. Thank you. Okay, tell me when I have a majority of council back. Okay. I'm looking for a motion to dismiss.
Move to adjourn.
Okay. Do I have a second? Two. Okay. Councilmember Treen.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed?
Good job, guys.
Nobody. Okay. See everybody in a couple of weeks.